All right, good evening. Calling to order our Tuesday, May 16th regular meeting. I will have our city clerk start with our roll call.
Mayor Kaylee Clark.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Amy Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Howe. Councilmember Kent Treen.
Present.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Rituja Indapure.
Present.
Councilmember Rushina Farrow. She was excused last week.
All right, thank you. So next up, we do have our Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Howe, if you'll give it.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's just like...
Yes. Yeah. Councilmember Treen, do you have the land acknowledgement up handy?
Yes.
Awesome. If you don't mind reading that.
We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of the coastal Salish people who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial.
Great, thank you. Next up, I think, Councilmember Howe, you did have an amendment for the agenda, if you want to do that first.
Yes, I'd like to move that we move the recognition of the youth from tonight's agenda to June 6th.
Second. So this is item number 9.
Yes.
He is not available to come this evening, so we're going to move to our first meeting in June. So all those in favor of removing that, say aye.
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 Opposed? All righty, so 6-0 on there. Next up, we have approval
I
of
can
the...
move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Great,
Second.
thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, so now we have public comment. We'll start in the room in just a moment. All right, so first up, I have just a K. Is it Karen? Yeah, awesome.
Hello, I'm Karen Hoyam, and I'm a neighbor of Inglewood Middle School. Dear Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding Inglewood's athletic fields. In January's mailing to 13 homes, we were told the City Council had expressed a desire to minimize impacts on adjacent properties, and this gave us hope, and we reached out to park staff with our concerns and requests. Tonight's packet lists meetings that occurred, but all but the planting review were initiated by neighbors, not city staff. And the result of these meetings has fallen far short of minimizing impacts. Yes, Parks and Rec have increased the planting plan, which is appreciated, and after we made them aware of the fact that prohibitions to amplification are often disregarded, they've agreed to enforce compliance if they're made aware of the issues. Prior to our discussions, Park and Rec believed the parking along Northeast 8th only occurred during large curriculum nights. However, parents park by this entrance to our street daily at pickup. When the hours and volume of rentals at this site multiply, drop-offs and pickups will occur throughout the entire span of use, and the parking issues will not be confined to the parking lot. The greatest concern we've expressed regards noise. Those living near the fields in all directions know concretely what the sound of one field being used equals, and that noise is manageable when use is occasional and no amplification occurs. However, the city expects to rent 2 to 3 fields simultaneously back to back to back until 9 p.m. each day. Plants are not a sound barrier. The intervening foliage will not be dense enough to block line of sight. There will be breaks and gaps, and plants are not solid. Effective sound barriers, as the consultant notes, are made of dense materials that are solid along their entire length. Cheering crowds of up to 135 people will be sitting very near the fence and up to 260 total. Yelling spectators that close by, even if facing away or perpendicular to the western properties, will make a tremendous amount of noise. Note, the consultant states it will be less than if facing the properties, not that it will be reasonable. The new design with the new surfaces, relocated softball field, and adult multi-use field will not, despite the claims in the noise review, be similar to what is currently experienced. The volume will be at least 2 to 3 times louder and will occur throughout the entire rental period. According to the city's own publication, camps are scheduled during daytime hours and most kids' practices are early as well. Park staff acknowledge that renting between 7 to 9 is not primarily about covering costs. The rental charges are minimum, so do not solicit use during these hours by making them available. Neighbors on all sides will be greatly affected by the great increase of use due to lighting, noise, parking, traffic, etc. Council, please truly minimize these effects to us by having rentals end no later than 7 p.m. so that we can enjoy our own properties on the edges of the day, just as residents will be enjoying the fields. Thanks.
Thank you. Suvarna?
Hello, I'm Suvarna Darapu, a neighbor of Inglewood Middle School. We live adjacent to Karen. This is regarding the same IMS fields. The Inglewood Middle School athletic field have very small borders between them and residential properties. So this field was designed to be used during daytime hours for the school's own athletic use. Lake Washington High School were built with the intention of having it fields with plenty of sound from night games. Inglewood does not have the buffer for either. While retrofitting these fields for city use, the city must also protect neighbors' properties. No protections from noise have been included in the design, and the surrounding properties will have at least 2 to 3 times more sound, and sound that is not occasional but persistent. Now, the sound is occasional and from one field at a time. We strongly request that rental periods end no longer than 7 p.m. so we can enjoy our properties in peace at the end of the day. More and stronger protections need to be included in the ILA amendment between the city and district to protect residents from amplification long-term. In addition to amplification being prohibited, the city needs to remove the clause allowing the Director of Parks and Recreation to approve exceptions to this rule. The city needs to be bound to monitor and exact penalties to any who ignore the prohibition of amplification in a manner that effectively enforce compliance. The future addition of sound equipment or use of schools' PA system by the city for outside events and or fields use needs to be expressly prohibited. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Phil Ritter. My wife, Lynn, and I have lived in Sammamish for 6 years. I'm a CPA and I do financial consulting for nonprofit housing developers. I'm on the steering committee of People for Climate Action. We appreciate that this city council has accomplished more on climate mitigation this year than the previous 10 years. And we are committed to helping you adopt a robust and effective climate action plan by the end of the year. You are being asked tonight to provide comments and questions on 53 different proposed greenhouse gas emission strategies, many of which have been tried and found effective in other cities, some of which have actually reduced their emissions over 40% over 30 years. The community advisory group you have created and on which I am a volunteer member will also be asked for comments and questions on this material, and I expect we will need a bunch of additional information from the Brightworks sustainability consultants as to where these strategies have been implemented and the results. One issue has come up with the consultants' proposed baseline emission number for transportation and the method to calculate the change in those emissions in future years. This calculation does not take into account how many of the trips are made by non-emitting vehicles. This is not consistent with the ICLEI greenhouse gas protocol, which says reporting transport emissions in either Scope 1 or 3 should only reflect emissions from combustion only, and they mean vehicles, I said emissions. The current data to correct this issue is available on the data.wa.gov site. With this correction, if we are able to see an increase in EV adoption over the next 7 years, we will see a corresponding decrease in transportation emissions. Without the change, we would not see a decrease. I think the council should request that the change in methodology be made now instead of down the road. The city needs to join the 5 East Side cities, which are working together on green direct power purchase for direct city electricity needs and ramping up campaigns, connecting residents to the federal IRA incentives and group purchase deals via the East Side Climate Challenge, Energy Smart East Side, and a new to-be-announced Rewire collaboration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. James?
James Eastman, Sammamish. Pam was in a particularly good mood today walking in, and I told her I'd be speaking to the environmental action plan on the agenda tonight, which I know she's a champion of, and all of you are, with the new city council goals. And I've gotten up here before and talked about the tip and connectivity through my property to areas where people travel up to 10 minutes around to get to where they want to go, and the need for new road connections up to the Thumb, and also possibility of one up to Timberline. I've approached the city in the past. There's a certain hesitancy given the fact that their plates are full, and there's all sorts of consternation over the last few years with the concurrency and potential widening of Sahali and some of the other things they were looking at, where they just hadn't got around to it. So it's good to see that we're taking a look at this tip, but somewhat a little baffled and confused. And I'm confused as followed, because these are some of the same weighting that we had in the past. It's nice to see that they're looking at connectivity and system connectiveness on the weighting system, but what I can't figure out is, like, why is the tip number 14 on the agenda tonight, and number 16 is reviewing the draft of the greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled reduction strategies? Why isn't that a weighted factor on this tip? Why aren't we looking at these connections if they're going to be reducing miles traveled, if that is such a huge thing as part of our city council goals and the climate action plan? Why aren't we weighing that as a factor on the tip? So I just think that should be part of this if we're truly kind of come up with a tip. And these sorts of things are important. I mean, the comprehensive plan is important, the tip is important, the TMP. That's what sets everything in motion to improve the city. So we really need to look at putting that in there, having some sort of weight for that designation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ram? Oh, thank you. All right, do we have anyone else that didn't get a chance to sign up? Yeah, go ahead. And you can just state your name and what city you live in. That would be great.
My name is Shira Paul, and I live in Sammamish in the Hidden Ridge neighborhood. which did not used to be Sammamish. It used to be Redmond, which is neither here nor there, except that I wonder sometimes whether the priorities of Sammamish City proper are taking precedence over the needs of the residents of my neighborhood, which is really Redmond, because I shop in Redmond, I turn left when I come out of my neighborhood. That's just the way it is. I don't know what caused us to be taken up into Sammamish in the first place. I suspect there was politics and money involved, like there usually are in these things. But I wanted to speak to, because I saw that the agenda item for the traffic improvement plan, the TIP, was in here tonight. And I just want to make sure that in thinking about making life more convenient and easier for the people who do live on the Sammamish Plateau, that the people who live on the Redmond side but still are in Sammamish proper are not compromised in any way. And I understand that that's, we all need to be part of the same city and we do need to compromise. But I want to speak specifically to what's going on in my neighborhood right now. We have a barrier between our neighborhood and between the Timberline neighborhood, which I suppose many of you are aware of. I know I've called the city a number of times to find out what the status is. That gate has been broken, stuck in the open position for, as far as I can tell, a month, 2 months, something like that. And what I was told is that there is a piece on order that needs to be gotten. And it just seems to me that it's taken a really long time, and I understand that that's possible in this day and age with supply chain, but I just wanted to find out here tonight if you, on the council, are aware of that, first of all, and if you know what the ETA would be on when that's going to be fixed, because as it is right now, the longer that stays open, there's been a noticeable uptick in traffic coming through my neighborhood, which is already bad. Okay. You can, you don't have to address me personally. I just want to make sure that it is an item of discussion out there, because the neighborhood that I moved into is the neighborhood I want to continue to live in. And, the density of the neighborhood is not increasing, and that's by design. And so I want to make sure that when I'm walking in the neighborhood, and I'm a dog walker, and there's kids playing in the street, that we don't see more of cars speeding down the hill coming down from Sammamish. We see less of that. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So I'd probably pass that on to Scott as a follow-up. All right. Is there anyone else in the room that would like? Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Yingju Ren. I'm also same neighborhood with her. And I also want to echo her comment, because you see my child who is 8 years old there, and is age of want independence and riding bike in the neighborhood. I want a safe neighborhood where I live. So I know even you talked about the greenhouse, traffic, vehicle emission. So if you open that barricade, that means more emission in my neighborhood and harmful to the children. So please consider that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, anybody else in the room? Okay, I think we're good for online, Lita.
If you wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand. For attendees who are joining by phone, please raise your hand by pressing *9. I currently see 2 hands raised, and I'll promote them in the order that they've raised their hands. One moment. Paul Stickney.
Good evening, City Council. Paul Stickney here. Sent an email today with some comments on 6 of your 18 long agenda pack items. Just going to speak to a couple of the 6 that I wrote about today. On the stormwater comp plan for SPW, a couple comments is, over the last couple years, SPW has presented at their meetings and ours that there's capacity for about 7,000 ERUs. And recently, a public comment that was written and submitted did some math that came up with that capacity close to 11,000 ERUs. And I did want to comment about interim and immediate solutions versus long-term solutions. Long story short, the water district did put interim and immediate solutions in play, and the long-term solutions for the either northern diversion or to take sewer south are all planned out either way. So there's really no real issue with their capacity. It really comes down to what do we want to do as a city. And also, multifamily housing uses less sewer and water per unit significantly than does large single-family homes. Talking about item number 5, and if I'm off base on this, apologize in advance, but I think it's premature to be discussing, I'm sorry, item number 15, excuse me, the financial sustainability plan contract. I think it's a little premature to be discussing a citizen, committee to guide changes to the budget until the council tackles what sort of issues are within bounds and out of bounds. I've heard over the years that most people run for city council to manage land use and manage the money for the budget. I think that there should be more discussion of the tough issues there first, and then have a committee that operates within guardrails that are set by appropriately elected officials first. My last topic is to chat a bit about the economic development element overview. And I wrote some things longer. I'll just talk to a couple high points. A lot of work was done in Sammamish from 2012 to 14 on economic development strategic plan. Then in 2017 and 18, there were 2 grants from the Port of Seattle, and much additional information was made available. Community Attributes was involved in all that. I suggest that all of those topics be folded into this because there was a lot of information there that can be helpful to guide economic development. Okay, appreciate the chance to speak.
Thank you.
I'll now promote the next attendee. Celia?
Yes, hello. Hi, good evening, City Council. I'm Sylvia Lowe, and I live in Sammamish. I'm currently in high school, and I went to Inglewood Middle School. And regarding the Inglewood Middle School Athletic Field Improvements Project, I just wanted to say that it's great that the city is working on things relating to children's education and athletics and making improvements or modernizing the athletic field. And as a graduate of Inglewood Middle School, I appreciate these gestures that benefit the environment of the athletics and PE programs at the school. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
We have one additional caller. I will promote them right now. Mary Wichter.
Good evening, Council. I have a very brief comment tonight. Mary Wichter, Sammamish for over 22 years. First of all, Paul Stickney, I believe everything he said was correct, but he did start that he was talking about the Stormwater Comprehensive Plan. Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer is in charge of water and sewer, and the city's in charge of stormwater. So he meant the wastewater comprehensive plan, which is related to sewers. Also, as part of the work SPW is doing, is they are going to be looking at more doing septic to sewers conversions, because we have such a large number of septics that are getting old in some of our areas, and they should be putting sewers into new areas where new development is, and also putting it in areas that need sewers because their septics are getting quite old. And then just on the mowing, you have a consent item on mowing. I don't know if there's some way in the longer term to have those mowing people also learn, particularly for ditches along the roadsides, what native plants are and when they could be left versus just mowing everything down. The weeds need to go and the grass needs to get shorter, but sometimes there are ferns and things that are not hurtful to the stormwater or drainage that could be left. Also, just on native plants, I don't know if it contributes to greenhouse gases emission reduction or not, but I think the more we do native plantings is super important, and I don't think things from the Urban Forestry Management Plan are coming forward fast enough. And then also, I believe there are still times in the city where people are moving trees, big trees, large trees, that the city either doesn't know about, or if they're reported, there isn't code enforcement to follow up. And what we really want is, we don't want to lose those trees in the first place. So I think we need more information about people and trees and keeping them and the benefits they have to the environment, and I'm sure that they affect climate change. If for nothing else, they help clean the water, they intercept the water, and they keep things cooler. So I don't have any more else to say, so I'll give the rest of my time. Thank you for a great meeting. I look forward to listening.
Thank you.
That concludes public comment for tonight. Back to you.
All right, next up we have our consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Can I had some questions, follow-up questions on the comprehensive plan from SPW. So can we pull that?
Are you talking item number 3?
Maybe. If that's the right, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't write down the number.
Sammamish Plateau Water Comprehensive Plan?
That's the one, thanks.
Okay, so we'll move that to, okay. I think that would be part of unfinished business after 14, if my pen would work. All right. Do you want to make that official motion?
Yeah, I'll approve to motion as amended.
Second.
Do we already have? I think we had I think it's okay, though. We had like a motion and then a second and then a motion and approved. Okay. All those in favor of the consent calendar as amended, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All righty. So first up, we do have our proclamations. So National Public Works Week, Councilmember Treen.
Yes, Sammamish, Washington proclaims National Public Works Week, May 21st through the 27th. Whereas the American Public Works Association acknowledges National Public Works Week each year in the third full week in May as a way to honor the tens of thousands of men and women in North America who provide and maintain the infrastructure and services collectively known as public works. And whereas the Sammamish City Council has long recognized that the work performed by Sammamish Public Works staff provides many essential services for a healthy, safe, and vibrant community through the management, design, construction, and maintenance of our vital infrastructure. Components such as clean stream water, safe and accessible transportation, infrastructure, reliable wastewater collection, efficient storm and surface water systems, timely solid waste collection, a functional and healthy public tree canopy, and vehicles critical to emergency response are provided. And whereas public works services provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives and creates a lasting impression, the health and safety and comfort of this community greatly depends on these facilities and services. And whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, are vitally dependent upon the efforts and skills of public work officials. And whereas these services are provided by a diverse workforce with a variety of backgrounds and experience levels that share a common mission, and whereas Public Works connects us all through infrastructure and service, enhancing the quality of life for the communities these professionals serve, hence the theme for 2023, Connecting the World Through Public Works. Now, therefore, Mayor Clark of the City of Sammamish, Washington, on behalf of the Sammamish City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of May 21st through the 27th as National Public Works Week in the City of Sammamish, Washington. And I call upon all citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works and to recognize the contributions which public work officials make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. Thank you.
Great, thank you. National Gun Violence Awareness Day, 2nd of June. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. Proclamation National Gun Violence Awareness Day, June 2nd, 2023. Whereas every day, more than 100 Americans are killed by gun violence, alongside more than 230 who are shot and wounded. And on average, there are more than 13,000 gun homicides every year. And whereas Americans are 25 times more likely to die by gun homicide than people in other high-income countries. And whereas Washington has 781 gun deaths every year, with a rate of 10.2 deaths per 100,000 people. Washington has the 40th highest rate of gun deaths in the U.S. And whereas gun homicides and assaults are concentrated in cities with more than half of all firearm-related gun deaths in the nation occurring in 127 cities. And whereas cities across the nation, including Sammamish, are working to end the senseless violence and with evidence-based solutions. And whereas protecting public safety in the communities they serve is mayor's highest responsibility. And whereas support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens goes hand in hand with keeping guns away from people with dangerous histories. And whereas mayors and law enforcement officers know their communities best and are therefore familiar with local criminal activity and how to address it, and are best positioned to understand how to keep their citizens safe. And whereas gun violence prevention is more important than ever as COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated gun violence with increased gun sales, increased calls to suicide and domestic violence hotlines, and an increase in city gun violence. And whereas in January 2013, Hadia Pendleton was tragically shot and killed at age 15. And on June 2nd, 2023, to recognize the birthday of Hadia Pendleton, born June 2nd, 1997, people across the United States will recognize National Gun Violence Awareness Day and wear orange in tribute to Hadia Pendleton and other victims of gun violence, and to the loved ones of those victims. And whereas the idea was inspired by a group of Hadia's friends who asked their classmates to commemorate her life by wearing orange. They chose this color because hunters wear orange to announce themselves to other hunters when out in the woods, and orange is a color that symbolizes the value of human life. And whereas anyone can join this campaign by pledging to wear orange on June 2nd, the first Friday of June of 2023, to help raise awareness about gun violence. And whereas by wearing orange from June 2nd through June 4th of 2023, Americans will raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives of gun violence victims and survivors. And whereas we renew our commitment to reduce gun violence and pledge to do all we can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and encourage responsible gun ownership to help keep our children safe. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Mayor Kaylee Clark, on behalf of the City Council, declares the first Friday in June, June 2nd, 2023, to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day. We encourage all citizens to support their local community's efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor and value human lives.
Thank you. Okay, so our third proclamation, sorry, this is the last meeting in May, so we have to do our June ones today. So on a, I guess, opposite note, it will be Pride Month in June. So this proclamation is for LGBTQIA+. Whereas our nation was founded upon the declaration that all people are created equal, that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are among the inalienable rights of every person, and that each person shall be accorded the equal protection of the law, and the LGBTQIA+ community has made great strides forward, but equality, inclusion, and acceptance have not yet been fully achieved. We must practice these values and teach them to future generations, and the City of Sammamish is committed to fostering diversity and inclusion. And on June 28, 1969, patrons of the Stonewall Inn in New York City rose up and resisted harassment that had become all too common for the members of the LGBTQIA+ community. Out of this resistance, the rights movement in America was born. During LGBTQIA+ Pride Month, we commemorate the events of June 1969 and commit to achieving equal justice under law for LGBTQIA+ Americans. Now, therefore, it be resolved that I, Mayor Kaylee Clark, on behalf of the Sammamish City Council, do hereby proclaim June 2023 as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, Intersex, and Asexual Pride Month. In the City of Sammamish, we encourage all residents to celebrate the progress within our culture towards justice, equality, and full civic recognition for LGBTQIA+ persons, and to join us in the fights that remain to be won. All right. Now, we are moving on to unfinished business, and thank you all for wearing orange and showing up. Inglewood Middle School. I believe Anjali is here. Yes, there you are.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, Mr. City Manager. I'm Anjali Maya, Director of Parks, Recreation and Facilities. Our team has been working hard on the Inglewood Middle School Field Improvements Project, and this evening we are requesting Council's authorization for the purchase of a prefabricated restroom building. There is a long lead time from construction documents and permitting to fabrication and delivery of the building, which is why we need this work to start now. The costs associated with this restroom will be shared by the city and the Lake Washington School District as outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding between the two agencies and will be included in an addendum to the interlocal agreement. We are close on finalizing the addendum, which we will also cover in the presentation tonight, and provide an update on the project design itself. With that, I'll turn it over to Kevin Teague, Deputy Director, to introduce other members on staff and the consultant.
Thank you, Anjali. Council and citizens that are listening. For the record, my name is Kevin Teague. I'm the Deputy Director for Parks, Recreation, and Facilities. We have brought a large part of our team tonight, hopefully not to overwhelm you, but we wanted to make sure that we had the best opportunity to answer your questions as accurately as possible. Leading the team from the city's side is our Park Project Manager, Michelle Arab. Michelle is doing a fabulous job of managing this very complex project. Also with us from the city is Emily Scott. Emily is our Recreation and Cultural Services Manager, and Emily is the one who deals primarily with the rental issues of athletic facilities. We are very pleased to have Bob Harding, Principal Landscape Architect from D.A. Hogan and Associates, as our lead consultant. Bob is a highly respected expert in athletic fields and synthetic turf. Additionally, we're happy to have Kristen Wallace join us tonight. Kristen is a Principal Environmental Noise Specialist with Landau Associates. And last but not least, we have Brian Buck, the Executive Director of Support Services with the Lake Washington School District. And we've been grateful for Brian's dedicated partnership as we work through many details of this project at Inglewood Middle School. So with that, I will turn it over to Michelle for the presentation and then join you at the end for questions.
Great. Thank you, Kevin, and good evening, everyone, Madam Mayor, council members, and city manager. Tonight, we will review the project background and update, review the draft addendum 4 to the interlocal agreement with Lake Washington School District, review the prefabricated restroom contract, and seek input, questions, and direction on the restroom contract. We are seeking City Council to authorize the City Manager to execute a contract with the Public Restroom Company to furnish and install a prefabricated restroom building at Inglewood Middle School. Approval to purchase the building is needed now to ensure the building is permitted, manufactured, and available for installation prior to the anticipated completion date of construction. We'll begin by briefly reviewing the project background. Inglewood Middle School is located in the northeast part of the city on the north side of Northeast 8th Street. For at least 10 years or more, the city has identified a need for improved or additional sports fields. In support of that goal, in 2022, City Council prioritized this project, executed a memorandum of understanding with the district, and authorized our design consultant, D.A. Hogan and Associates, to proceed with design services. For almost 20 years, the Lake Washington School District and the City of Sammamish have enjoyed a long and mutually beneficial partnership to offer quality athletic facilities to both students and the greater community. In 2004, the city and the district entered into an interlocal agreement, or ILA. The ILA lays out the terms for joint use of the district's facilities within the city. With developable land scarce in Sammamish, this partnership allows district-owned fields that would otherwise go unused during non-school hours to be available to community groups. This partnership with the district is also fitting with the recommendations of our PRO plan to address demand for athletic fields. Through reusing and optimizing an underutilized resource, this project is a prime example of sustainable development. By upgrading this resource, the investment in these fields will be directed solely on the field improvements rather than developing new sites. Here is a side-by-side comparison of the existing fields to the left and the proposed improvements to the right. The football field and track have shifted to the north, making room for two synthetic multi-purpose fields that will accommodate football, soccer, and lacrosse. The fields to the south will accommodate a 200-foot softball field and a 300-foot baseball field, with batting cages, bullpens, and dugouts. And all of the fields will be lit. This project also will be This project will also be impactful to citizens who face mobility and accessibility challenges, with proposed features including accessible synthetic turf fields, a new accessible gender-neutral restroom building, removal of mobility barriers, wheelchair-friendly dugouts, and accessible parking at field level for one van and two standard vehicles. Now let's review the project update. The overall timeline for the project has pushed out about 3 months due to stormwater coordination and permitting review. The project is currently in for permit, and we anticipate wrapping up construction documents by the end of the summer. Bidding and contractor selection will take place in late summer, early fall, and we anticipate that the fields will be open in late summer 2024. Throughout the design process, D.A. Hogan and Associates have reviewed and updated estimated costs, which remain on track. The city costs are allocated in the 2023-24 Park CIP budget and are inclusive of all planning, design, and construction costs. The City of Sammamish has also submitted the project for consideration in the State of Washington 2023 legislative session for local community project funding and a King County Parks Levy grant for $1 million each. Decisions for both will be made at some point this spring. In January of this year, we contacted neighbors directly adjacent to Inglewood Middle School with project information and the offer to discuss the project in person. This outreach was not required, but we felt it was important to hear possible concerns at that stage in the design. Letters were sent to 13 property owners whose parcels are outlined with the red dash. HOA-owned properties without residences on them did not receive letters. At this point, we have met with the neighbors to the west of the project several times since January, hearing their concerns, including lighting, privacy, noise, and hours of operation. When possible, and without compromising the use of the fields for the community, we have made design decisions or changes with the neighbors in mind. In addition to our outreach to neighbors directly adjacent to Inglewood Middle School, a formal legal notice through the SEPA review process will be mailed to all property owners within 1,000 feet of the project site. There will be a 21-day comment period, which hasn't started yet. Once we have completed the SEPA process, we will return to City Council with the finalized Addendum 4. Here you'll see the lighting impact plan, which was shared with the neighbors. During preliminary planning efforts, City Council expressed a desire to minimize lighting impacts on adjacent properties. In support of that direction, the proposed design is a highly focused lighting system with shielded LED fixtures, which limit light spill outside of the project improvements. While the plan shows low light spill to the west or bottom of the plan you see here, the calculations do not account for existing and proposed trees, which will help minimize light spill even more than what is shown. On the bottom of the plan, you'll see 5 red lines. These indicate where graphics were created to further study potential lighting impacts to the west neighbors. 2 of the graphics are shown here, highlighting the relationship between the proposed light pole, extent of light spill, property line, and location of the residence. The yellow line indicates the maximum possible spill, again, without factoring in the trees. I also want to highlight on this slide that the property line is on average approximately 20 feet from the proposed fence. This planted buffer on district property is not required of the project, but the design team and staff felt it was important to minimize regrading efforts and to retain as many existing trees as possible. Retaining existing trees and adding new planting were critical aspects of developing the planting plan shown here. As a result of meeting with the west neighbors and hearing their concerns regarding privacy, the design team revised the planting to provide more visual buffer between the fields and the west neighbors. In this enlargement of the softball field at the west property line, you can see the location of the property line in red, existing trees to remain in pink, proposed planting in green, and the proposed fence in orange. 89 new replacement trees are required by code. In an effort to provide more privacy to the neighbors to the west, 100 additional trees have been added to the west property boundary. We have also offered to meet with the neighbors during installation to fine-tune the location of the new trees to ensure that they have as much privacy as possible. In addition to light and privacy, noise is another concern we have heard from the west neighbors. The neighbors have asked about the inclusion of a sound wall or the reconfiguration of the field. In an effort to better respond to those concerns, our design team reached out to Landau Associates, a firm with over 25 years of air quality and noise experience in the Northwest. Their letter can be found as Exhibit 3 with our agenda packet. After reviewing our project, no specific design-related changes were suggested, as they would be ineffective, such as a sound wall where the proposed fence is located, or unnecessary, as the softball field is already facing away from the neighbors. We'll now take a look at the draft interlocal agreement Addendum 4 between the city and the district. On September September 20th, 2022, City Council authorized the execution of the Memorandum of Understanding between the district and the city for the development of athletic fields at Inglewood Middle School. Addendum 4 will further establish the agreement in terms of design and construction, maintenance, scheduling, and financial responsibilities. We are sharing the draft terms we have reviewed with the district and city attorney. Once we have completed the SEPA process, we will return to City Council with the finalized Addendum 4. For design and construction, terms reflect what was agreed upon in the Memorandum of Understanding. Regarding maintenance, the district will maintain the track, shot put area, and landscaping. The city will maintain the synthetic turf fields and restroom facility. The district and city will share maintenance, repair, and utility costs based on percentage of use reconciled annually. For the addendum duration related to turf life cycles and possible early termination of the agreement, terms reflect what was agreed upon in the Memorandum of Understanding. Since 2020, the city has been the scheduling coordinator for the Inglewood Middle School fields, and the city will continue to do so in accordance to Addendum 4. Scheduled city use has been updated since the presentation was uploaded. The current proposed typical times are that the city use the fields from 4:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. on weekdays and 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekends from the first day of the school year to the last day of the school year. From the first day of summer break to the last day of summer break, proposed use is from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. These proposed times are within state and county noise codes, which define daytime hours as 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. weekdays and 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. weekends. Lighting will be available for city rentals and events, and amplification will not be permitted during city use unless approved by the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Facilities or their designee. The agreement also establishes financial responsibilities for ongoing maintenance, repair, and utility costs based on percentage of use reconciled annually. And finally, let's review the prefabricated restroom contract. Again, approval to purchase the building is needed now to ensure the building is permitted, manufactured, and available for installation prior to project completion. Here you'll see the proposed restroom building. The building includes 3 accessible gender-neutral restrooms, each equipped with 1 toilet, 1 urinal, and 1 baby changing station. A drinking fountain with bottle filler mounted to the exterior of the building, and a utility chase between the 3 restrooms. There are a number of sustainable features, including water and energy-efficient fixtures. Solar panels could be added to the building through a separate provider and contract. The proposed restroom location is represented by the red rectangle close to the center of the field improvement. This restroom building will be a significant addition to this project, as there are no restroom facilities for field users currently. Costs for the public restroom company contract and state taxes will be shared evenly between the district and the city for a total of $332,210, purchased through the National Purchasing Cooperative Buy Board. Additionally, we are requesting funds for city expenses related to 10% contingency costs and a solar panel allowance if council is interested in adding this feature. Solar panels won't require any structural changes to the restroom building, so the contract before you is valid with or without solar panels. Estimated solar panel costs are expected to be covered by the $35,000 allowance. With potential energy savings, rebates, and tax incentives factored into the reduced overall cost, it could take approximately 13 years to see a return on investment. We have covered a lot, and at this point, I welcome your input and questions.
Councilmember Howe.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I would like to understand, it sounds like, in terms of the mitigation and accommodations you've made based on residents' comments, it appears you're adding 100 more trees, and you've moved some components around. Is that correct? Is there anything else that I missed in that?
Michelle, do you want to respond to that one?
Sure, yes. So we have added trees and shrubs. We have also, made sure to retain as many existing trees as we can.
Right.
And maintain that buffer.
The 20-foot buffer. Right.
Yes.
Okay. The question I have too has to do kind of with timing of things. In the summertime, do people even need lights? I'm kind of wondering because it seems like things are pretty bright until about 9 or 10 anyway. So are the lights are kind of a bonus feature for the summer, I take it, and wouldn't be used that much, maybe.
They would be used when necessary.
Only when necessary.
They wouldn't necessarily even be turned on if a daylight was bright enough for play.
Yeah, and they have to contract with the city to use the lights at all, right?
Right. That would be part of their contract.
Right. And when someone books a contract with the city, they tell you exactly what kind of an event it's going to be. So, what kind of a ball game and so forth. Do you have any projections on usage at this point, or is it really just an unknown target?
We do have some pretty good projections. We've mentioned the additional hours that we believe that we would get, and we're not believing that we're going to get maximum hours if you take those timeframes and multiply them out. But we have mentioned to council before. We believe we'd get 2,500 at least hours of rentable time within that scope.
And what about the residents' concerns over parking? I mean, that is their private road. There's a little bit of signage there, but to be honest with you, I missed the signage when I was there walking the property myself and wondered if perhaps they could put some stanchions or something something more substantial and better signage to help delineate that, this is private road, you can't park here. There may be something there that could help just buffer them on the parking side. Are you worried about parking at all in terms of the increased activity, or do you feel like you have ample parking?
Yeah, we believe that there's ample parking. We've had a parking study done. There's ample parking for community use. Now, what we have heard that say on curriculum night at Inglewood Middle School, it's just jam-packed and there's people parked all over. However, we, as I mentioned, we've done a parking study. We know that there are at the end, when the construction is done, we'll have 235 parking stalls at the Inglewood Middle School site. Additionally, next door at Rachel Carson Elementary, there's an additional 62 parking stalls, and it's easy walking distance between them. We don't believe we would have anywhere near the need for that, and our study backs that up.
Okay. And the other thing that I just wanted to kind of ask around, and in particular around the sound issues, like when I've been there, I could hear Rachel Carson because it's a flat field. It's just the sound is going to disperse. It just does. And so I appreciate the work that you guys did to try to find some kind of ideas. Now, as it happens, the individual homeowners have very large pieces of property, some in fact are R4, and it would appear that they would have room to actually put potentially some kind of sound barrier on their own property. Is there any idea, and I'm not going to pronounce this right, for a Gambian wall? Would that work for them, do you think? And is that the right pronunciation?
It's a Gabion. I think you're speaking of a Gabion wall.
Yes.
Kristen, maybe we could have you speak to that if you're available right now.
Because it's a pretty affordable wall. It's about $25 a square foot, so.
Can you explain what a Gabion wall is?
Sure. A Gabion wall is a wire cage generally filled with rocks.
Or sand.
And they will typically be between 18 inches wide and can be any height.
if it's placed close enough to the receivers, to the residences, it could potentially be effective. It's a complicated calculation, and it's still quite far at that point from the sources. So that would reduce the effectiveness. But if it were placed, like maybe not at the property boundary, but near to the actual residents themselves, it could potentially provide, a noticeable reduction. And if it's a gabion wall filled with rocks or sand, it certainly would be dense enough to prevent anything coming through it. So that would certainly be effective as far as a material. But we admittedly did not, calculate or look at that.
One of the things to consider with something like that would be what would the impact be on the existing tree buffer to put something on the property line, and that's one of the things that we've been obviously trying not to reduce the number of trees on the property line.
Right, and I appreciate that. It's also trying to figure out, what kind of buffer could be beneficial and helpful, and effective, in terms of placement.
Oh, sorry. And as far as on the property boundary itself, when it's on the property boundary, it's the farthest from both, in distance from both the receiver and the sources. And I would not expect such a wall to be very effective unless it was extraordinarily tall.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And just as a final note, I am very much in support of moving ahead with the bathrooms.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
So I had a question regarding the noise. Obviously, we have some residents here that are really concerned, and the expert that we had brought in, Landau Associates, I was trying to see what kind of projects they had worked on in the past, just to, in my own, trying to verify, their expertise. Do you have like a list of projects that they've worked on successfully? I'm hoping that, oh, okay. I totally forgot, I apologize. Are there projects that perhaps would help the residents understand kind of the magnitude of projects that you've worked on and helped solve this solution? Or this problem, sorry.
This is Kristen Wallace with Landau. I've been with Landau for a year, so most of my experience has been prior to my work at this company, but I have worked on a number of athletic fields, and sometimes they're associated with schools, middle schools, and high schools in Sumner School District, Bethel School District, and up north, North Shore School District. I've also worked quite a while back on the Magnuson Sandpoint fields when they improved those and put in turf fields and lighting, and that was also had concerned neighbors, and we conducted the studies for that.
And did the project end up being successful? Like, were the recommendations that you made, did that play out the way it should?
Yes, for most of these, you control it through timing restrictions. You don't want to be allowing these activities, past 10 p.m., late at night, anything like that. There are some specific. And then occasionally you'll have like directivity where you want to face a field in a certain direction, and that has been accomplished in this particular plan, actually prior to my coming on. So yes, we found that the recommendations have been successful.
Okay, so do you think the city has done like as much as they can in terms of alleviating the noise level?
It's often, well, that's a good question. I think their suggestions for the trees are very helpful, even though they may not be dense enough to stop most noises. the sources associated with athletic fields are at higher frequency, and they are more likely to be scattered. Because they're a higher frequency and they're spread out at quite a distance, they will naturally attenuate quite a bit more than, let's say, low engine noise or something of that sort. So that does not mean that they won't be audible, but they will not be at a high volume.
Okay, thank you. I did have another question regarding the use of like boom boxes. So that currently isn't allowed, right? There's no change in policy there.
No, we are not making any change in policy, and it's possible to, through rental agreements, let folks know that they aren't allowed to use their boom boxes. That said, there's open field time when the fields aren't reserved, and we can't stop who shows up and turns on a boom box.
Okay. And just one other one. I do approve the restrooms. I was reading about the dark sky compliant lights. I hadn't heard of those before. Is that something that we'll be looking at to use in the future, like as appropriate?
I believe so. And Bob, are you there? Can you speak to that, the dark sky lights?
Yes. So particularly as related to the sports field lighting, the current design of the system that's designed and specific to the Musco lighting system has a very focused beams, if you will, the photometrics on the lights, particularly with the LED type lamps and fixtures, focus the light very distinctly onto the field of play. So much so that sometimes the ball gets kicked out of the light. If a ball's kicked up in the air, it could actually leave the lighted area. There are a few lights that are added or included that are an uplight to help illuminate the underside of the ball when it's in play. That's allowed as part of the dark skies protocols and measurements. You can have up to 7% of the lights pointing up, if you will, and the design captures those requirements and meets the dark skies requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you for a really thorough presentation and for the work there. I want to thank all the community members for coming in and engaging, and I'm sure we'll stay engaged as we continue to move along the project. As someone who frequented those fields for many years as part of Little League, I appreciate some of the things, the closest bleachers will actually be facing away, so that will hopefully direct the sound in other directions. The voice does not tend to carry backwards, so I think that will help to some degree. And while I appreciate the thoughts that we want to try to reduce the hours, I do think the challenge there is that we are just in such desperate need of community fields, and if we reduce the hours, then it starts to not be such a good cost to benefit ratio there. I will also point out that in the winter, right during the school year, you will have a lot of rainy days, and so the two fields that I think you're most concerned about will still not get play in the evenings if it's raining, right? So Little League still gets canceled in the rain, even on artificial turf fields. So that is definitely a factor, having had to schedule umpires in the winter time, or in the spring and stuff. So I think we can keep working with you guys and keep engaging to try to find a solution that works for everybody. My question is really around the solar panels on the bathroom. So you said, and I appreciate, because you answered one of my questions, is it'll be about a 13-year break even. What's the expected life of that prefabricated bathroom structure?
From the previous ones, and this is the same company that we've used at Sammamish Landing and at Big Rock Central, it's 20 years basic, but then I think it's 30 years for the structure itself. Michelle, do you recall that from the contract? But
yes, it's actually a 20-year warranty on the structure.
All right, cool. And then would if we went with solar panels, would they be hooked up to the grid, or would they be used directly and then only excess would go to the grid?
We would connect them to the grid. We were concerned if we were trying to store power that we didn't have room in the pipe chase for battery units.
Makes sense. Okay. And I appreciate the, focus on sustainability, right? And I think that's one of the questions is as we move forward and we do these projects, how do we find that intersectionality? So I really appreciate that. And we'll probably have to talk more about how we figure out the solar and maybe if we listen to some of the recommendations and we can increase the sustainability of our electricity, it won't be as big of a deal. So I guess one other question. So on the outside of the bathroom, it showed 2 water fountains and only 1 bottle filling station. Is there an option to switch that around? I kind of feel like in the post-COVID world, less people use water fountains and a lot more people bring their own water bottles.
Do you know that, Michelle?
I think with accessibility, you have to have the 2 drinking fountains at 2 different levels.
Okay.
I think that's required by code.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, Council, if there's no other questions.
Yeah, I first would just like to thank the staff, and then you still have time during the SEPA review to put your comments in. So if you're a concerned resident on the project, I would stay akin to that and keep your watchful eye as that comes forward. With that being said, I'd like to move to authorize the city manager to execute a contract with the public restaurant company to furnish and install a prefabricated restroom building at the Englewood Middle School Athletic Field Improvement Project, and discuss draft interlocal agreement addendum 4 between the city and Lake Washington School District for the Englewood Middle School Athletic Field Improvement Project.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion on that?
It's all about timing and getting a project in on budget and on time, so this needs to happen now.
I had a question.
Oh, yeah, go
I had a question whether or not we were moving forward with solar panels.
That option is available in the motion.
It is? Okay.
Do we have to decide that now, though?
No, that's coming back, isn't it?
Okay.
Coming back? Okay.
All right, all those in favor of Councilmember Treen's motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone. Michelle and Emily and Brian and Bob and Kristen, thank you so much.
Thank you for your
Thank you,
time.
Anjali and
Thank
Kevin.
you, Council.
Thank you.
All right, item number 14, Transportation Improvement Plan, Audrey, Lindsay, and Doug.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll allow us a moment here to do a little transitioning between staff and get the other folks promoted as presenters, and we will be with everyone shortly.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. For the record, Interim Public Works Director Audrey Starcy. This evening, we are very excited to introduce a few options for Council's consideration for the 2024 through 2029 Transportation Improvement Plan. Presenting this evening is our Transportation Planner, Lindsay Channing, along with our Senior Transportation Planning Manager, Doug McIntyre. Lindsay and Doug, whenever you are ready, go ahead and kick us off. Thank you.
You're muted, Lindsay.
See that. Great. Thank you, Audrey. And good evening, Council. This evening, we're conducting our workshop on the 2024-2029 Transportation Improvement Plan for the year. We're going to quickly go through just the highlights of the background and purpose of the tip again, just as a reminder and for the public participating this evening. We're also going to be going over the draft 2024-2029 tip options, which we have 2 for you this evening, and the next steps, and then moving into discussion. So this evening, what we're looking for after discussion with council is what your preferred option is to bring back more refined for the public hearing in June. By way of background, we are required to adopt a TIP or Transportation Improvement Plan pursuant to RCW. It's a 6-year comprehensive plan that's required to be adopted annually. It's a planning document that doesn't establish an expense authority. And our current 2023-2028 TIP was adopted in the beginning of July of last year. We have created a number of categories this year for the various projects and programs in our TIP, which includes citywide programs, traffic, safety, and non-motorized projects, connection projects, corridor projects, and regional projects. To give you an overview of the similarities and differences between the 2 options before we dive into them, we've put together this slide for you. The items with check marks are the similarities, and the items with the arrows are the differences. So both options fund programs. We have combined the sidewalk and non-motorized programs based on feedback from council last week when other members of our team presented in regards to the programs. And there was a desire for those 2 separate programs to become one. So we have illustrated that and added the funds accordingly for those 2 programs to become one. We are also funding TR 54, which is a concurrency project. We're also funding 2 projects that have received grant funding. And we also have ranked all of our projects using the scoring criteria that we discussed with council in April. As for the differences, option 1 ranks, it funds all of the programs, and then we ranked our projects from 1 to N, however number of projects there are, and we are funding the top 2 scoring projects. Option 2, again, sorted the projects, but it sorts projects in each category, and we have funded at least the top scoring project in each category. This is just a screenshot of what option 1 will look like, and we will dive into that here momentarily. I'll be pulling up the PDF so we can see it more clearly in the entire list. You will see this is option 2 with different categories. And again, I'll be pulling that up just momentarily. But I wanted to try and get through our PowerPoint so that we can spend more time on those PDF documents. For the next steps, after the discussion and direction from council this evening, we'll make adjustments as needed. We'll continue to work with our CIP engineering and traffic engineering teams to refine our list. We'll continue to coordinate with our finance department to refine financial data and our revenue. And then we'll be holding our public hearing and gather public testimony, and then adoption of the 2024-2029 TIP. Once it's adopted, we will then transmit it to Washington State Department of Transportation. Again, we're looking for direction on which option is preferred by council for us to refine and bring back for the public hearing on June 6th. So with that, let me switch over to our PDFs so that I can show you option 1. All right, council. So at the top of this spreadsheet, you will see this is our transportation program. As mentioned during the PowerPoint presentation, we did combine the sidewalk gap and non-motorized program. Each of these programs had $100,000 allocated to them in the 2024 biennium budget. So we have combined that as well to give it a total of $200,000. You will see that each of these programs are funded as they were funded in the 2024 biennium budget. And then below, under the transportation projects, we have our rankings, and it's a priority rank of 1 through 27. And within that list, as I mentioned earlier, we did provide funding to Priority Rank 1 and Priority Rank 2. Both of these projects are corridor projects. The first one is Sahalee Way Northeast from city limits to 28th Place and 23rd Avenue. What we're proposing through this is to fund the entire corridor study plus get to 30% design. That's an important stage in the design process because that's when you understand what type of right-of-way acquisitions you would need, adjustments that need to be made, and we'll have a good sense of what the project would entail. And so we could then come back to council when we update our TIP in future years to better allocate funds moving forward for a completed project. We also have priority rank number 2, which is the corridor project Issaquah Pine Lake Road, phase 1. This project made it to 60% design before it was placed on hold. So we're proposing in 2027 through 2029 to complete design and begin construction of this project in option 1. I also would like to mention that all of the numbers in both options 1 and 2 are planning level estimates. We did get updated estimates for the year 2023 from engineers. So they are accurate estimation numbers for today. Also, none of our projects include right-of-way acquisition. So that is an unknown cost at this point in time. So it's not factored into proposed funding numbers in our TIP. TR 54, this has one asterisk, which with our legend up here indicates that it is the one concurrency project we have on our TIP this year. And so we are proposing funding it in 2024 and 2025 so that we can complete design and construction. Then moving down, we have 2 other projects that are, double asterisk, which means that they have some grant funding associated with them. So the Louis Thompson Road Tightline project, which is a flood mitigation and non-motorized project, we have funded in 2024 and 2025 with complete design and construction. The other grant funded project is down here at priority ranking 17, and this is the flood mitigation at Southeast Issaquah Falls City Road for Endeavor Elementary School. This again is funded from 2024 to 2026 and will complete the design and construction. Lastly, I would point out that we do have 2 other projects listed on this TIP further down the line than the top priority rankings. And that is TR 63, the flood mitigation, 212th Avenue Southeast to Southeast 14th Place. And this is $30,000 roughly to conduct a study in 2024. And then item priority rank 21, which is TR 55, 242nd Avenue Northeast, Northeast 8th, for roughly $20,000 to conduct a study here as well. Both of these projects were allocated these funds in the 2024 biennium budget, which is part of the reason we are showing funding for these, and also because they both would provide a study for us to understand if the project needs to move forward, and if it does, what costs and configuration would look like. Underneath, we have our regional projects listed. We do not rank these by priority, nor do we provide funding for these, but we like to keep them on the list so that if and when opportunities become available to work with our partners at neighboring jurisdictions, we have the opportunity to potentially do so. So that is option 1. Doug, did you have anything you wanted to add to this before I move to option 2? I'm happy to take questions on option 1 before we move to option 2 if council would like to do that as well.
I don't see hands, so I think it's good to move to the second and then we'll ask. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. So option 2, as described, has different categories or buckets that we have placed projects into. We will start with, again, we have the programs This section is exactly the same as described in option 1, no changes between the two options. Then we have created the various categories. So all of these projects in option 1 were ranked 1 through 27, and they were listed what the project type was, but we ranked it by the overall priority rank. In this option, we've separated them into their different categories. So we have traffic safety, non-motorized improvements, and input all of those corresponding projects and ranked them. We have connection projects. Oops, I'm sorry, that jumped. We have corridor improvement projects. And then again, the regional projects, which are unfunded, nor do they have priority rankings. In this scenario, we have a number of projects proposed to get some funding, either partial or full funding, over the next 6 years. The first one being TR 54, which is 228th Avenue and Southeast 40th turn lane improvements. This again is a concurrency project as indicated by the asterisk. And we're proposing that complete design and construction can be accomplished between years 2024 and 2025. Priority number 3 is the Louis Thompson Road Tightline project. This is that flood mitigation and non-motorized project, which has received some grant funding. This one, we're proposing complete design and construction between 2024 and 2025 as well. We have that flood mitigation 212th Avenue Southeast project that I discussed in option 1 to conduct the study only in 2024 at $30,000. Our other grant-funded project, the Endeavor Elementary School and Southeast Duthie Hill Road project, would be funded from 2024 through 2026, and this would complete design and construction. And then we also have that 242nd Avenue Northeast and Northeast 8th Street project to conduct the study only at roughly $20,000. Moving down to connection projects, we have a number of new roads or connections added to the list this year. Connections category type is also a category that we have not utilized in the past and we have added this year. These new ones are ones that have been part of the town center plan since 2006 to 2007, when that plan was created, and these roads have not come to fruition yet. With development expected and ongoing in the town center, we felt it was prudent that it was time that these connections needed to be added to our TIP to be considered. So with that, the highest priority ranked project based on our criteria was the Northeast Connector Road, which includes an extension of 232nd Avenue. We're showing, again, without knowing the right-of-way requirements, there is a little bit of right-of-way associated with this already, but we don't know how much, if any, would be required. We would fund this project in 2027 through 2029 for design and construction. That is the only project we're recommending funding in this option under connections. For corridor improvement projects, we have 2 projects on the list being recommended. We have priority rank number 1, Sahalee Way Northeast, city limits to 28th Place and 23rd Avenue to 23rd Avenue. This again is the corridor study and to get to 30% design, and proposing that that be funded in 2024. And then we have, again, Issaquah Pine Lake Road, phase 1 to complete design and begin construction starting in 2029. With both of our options and spreading the funds across, we tried to keep it as balanced as possible across the 6 years, also aligning it with the existing 2023-2024 biennium budget. Again, as a reminder, we do have our reasonably assumed funds for this TIP, our REIT and TIF funds, which equates to approximately $32,300,000. So with that information, Council, that concludes my presentation of our draft tip options, and I open it up for questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, on option 2, can you go to the second page? Because I think there was another category that we didn't talk about.
That's the regional projects.
Oh, those are the regionals. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, first of all, whichever way we go, I like the categories, because the one big long list, I don't know, it's like makes my eyes roll back in my head. So I like the presentation of that very much. A couple of questions. For your assumptions, in terms of the REIT and the impact fees, I think you assumed, how did you come up with your assumption for the number of single family and the number of multifamily per year? What was that based on?
Yes, step in for that one, Lindsay.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you, Councilmember Stewart. We worked closely with our counterparts in DCD to assess the pipeline, the application pipeline, and look toward the future to understand what is likely to be built in those 6 years, and given everything we know today, and then apply the fees to that and then multiply it over the 6 years. So that is how we came up with those numbers. In the agenda bill, we had a little breakdown of those assumptions a little bit further, and use those to conservatively estimate what we would have available in the 6-year window.
Okay, so it's mostly the application pipeline, not so much what we're looking at doing, because we don't have a new comp plan yet and what we're looking at for that. Okay, that's fair. For the Sahali study, and you haven't started that yet, maybe you can't answer this, but would that include a focus on, alternatives to just single occupancy vehicles, right, or cars? Would that be sort of that comprehensive, like looking at transit and other modes of transportation as well?
Exactly, yeah. We have done studies in the past, and they have primarily focused on vehicular, primarily getting vehicles through throughput. And this study would be much more comprehensive, more complete street oriented, taking into account all the different modes. So yes, that is definitely part of it.
Okay, and then just trying to look this over, it looks like really the difference between option 1 and option 2 is that we would, if we went with option 2 instead of option 1, we'd be swapping out, well, we'd be pushing out the timeline. We wouldn't even get rid of it completely. The Issaquah Pine Lake Road project, so that would start later, and we would pull forward a connector project, if I really kind of tried to distill it down to the differences, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to assess it. Given the funding constraints that we have, there's not a lot of flexibility.
Yep.
But I think it is fair to say that with option 2, you kind of spread the love a little bit more,
yep,
whereas option 1 is maybe a little bit more focused on the corridor.
No, I actually really do like option 2. A couple other thoughts, and Doug, we've kind of talked about this before, which is especially in that top section where we have relatively small amounts of money in a lot of different buckets, and I know you guys are already trying to figure out how do you sort of pool your resources to do more. We say that at Microsoft all the time now, do more with less. But one of the things that I don't know that we look at, but you guys might, is as we're looking to see which projects we're going to go do, right? Like, so for the ADA projects, for example, I'm assuming you kind of have a sorted or a stacked ranked list of here's the order we're going to go through these projects in. But is there some flexibility to say, hey, instead of working on this ADA project, which is the next one on the list, we already know we're going to be doing, some work over here anyway. So can we combine those things so that we're not digging up things twice, or we maybe are getting some cost savings because we can kind of bundle them together? And I'm thinking particularly around some of the school safety zone program stuff, again, trying to really look at that. And then also in conjunction with other projects that we have going on, whether it's the overlay project or other road construction projects, to make sure we're really getting the most out of, what we do. And I know we've had a number of instances. I'm thinking of the Lewis Thompson pipeline project, right? There might be a section there at the top where the sidewalks don't quite connect. Is that worth doing because we're already going to have the road torn up and blocked off? And so there might actually be cost savings to do that connector, that sidewalk connector, while we're doing that project or something like that. Is I don't think that we built that into our scoring. Do you guys have that flexibility to really be looking across the system and making those decisions?
Yeah, you're correct. The programs weren't scored because they're a little bit different, but think of the programs as a little bit more flexible. There are not projects in all of those that are identified necessarily. Some of them do have, like sidewalk, we do have a good sense of the projects that we would pursue, but there is more flexibility built into those programs. So for instance, you mentioned the school zone safety. The way that we've kind of thought of that in the past is kind of as things have arisen, through the course of a year, if there's good reason to do something, that program could fund something of that nature. It's definitely more flexible, allows you to be a little bit more targeted as needed throughout the year.
Okay, because that's where I really want to see us try to optimize around those things where we're already have something going on. Because we have a couple of times worked on a project and then it feels like less than a year later had to go back and do something else where, oh gosh, couldn't we have done that all together? So I really appreciate this. I know it's a ton of work, and I do like the categories in option 2. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Howe?
Thank you. And I would lean hard into option 2 as well. I do have a question, and it has to do with the conversation, Lindsay and Doug, that we've had before about grants, and that we understand that people are more inclined to fund things that are shovel ready. And as I look at this list, and I want to pick something that, like Duthie Hill, maybe, I think, which is 100. I think, which that looks like a meaty project that's $5 million projected that you'd be spending. Is that the type of thing that you would push hard on to get the design done early and then go out as quickly as you can to see if we can get additional grant funding for this?
Yeah.
Or what's your thought process?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So just by way of kind of giving some general context, you're correct. Typically, from what we're seeing, a lot of the funds that are available right now are, less on the planning and design side. There is definitely funds available, but they're really competitive. The construction funds tend to be a little bit higher in dollar amount. So I think that's a way to say that yes, people like to fund ribbon cuttings, and so with this specific project, though, TR100. The flood mitigation project. So we actually do have a grant for that right now. We got a King County flood reduction grant, which is why this one, even though it is lower in the priority.
I figured you must have some money for that or it wouldn't be showing up like this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of a point that we wanted to make, is that when you look for grants, a lot of times that, you might not have a project that is your number one priority that's going to fit that grant requirement, but, it doesn't mean that you can't go further down the list. It just kind of essentially commits you to that project. So once you start getting grant funds and you start telling funders that you're going to build it, you're going to be expected to build it. So it sometimes flip-flops the priorities a little bit, which you can see on this, actually both option 1 and option 2, you can see how it kind of goes a little bit out of priority order. But with that being said, we do have a grant for TR100, and it does fund both design and construction. So we are looking at that one being completed hopefully by early 2026. And so it's kind of like building momentum. Once you get one grant and you start working on design, you can tend to be more appealing to other funders. And so, yes, I think as this one goes along, we might be able to get some other funds. We actually do have a Safe Routes to School grant application in already for this project, and we're awaiting a decision on that, I believe, in June. So there was some foresight for this, at least getting multiple funding options there. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. If there's others, I can.
Yeah, it does. I would kind of go just a little bit further with that and just ask a question around. I'm guessing that traffic and safety and non-motorized are popular areas in terms of the funding componentry. It would be great to have just some kind of mark on your sheet that tells me what yep, we have a grant for this already, and where you're targeting. Because I instead of driving the staff crazy asking the question, do you have any grants yet? because I know it's super fun, but maybe you could delay our fun and just, highlight somehow for us that we really think we have a shot maybe with these 4 projects as possibilities, because we are in we're in a good place with the design. We've already got a track for the design. Or, council, we need you to fund this design so that we can get on that list. But we need that heads up somehow.
Yeah, and so this is actually a good time to kind of talk about this question, because we are trying to kind of really position ourselves well to be competitive in grant funding cycles. A couple things that have happened recently are we've applied for grants. We submitted one last year for a corridor project, and we were very much not competitive because there's just a whole shift in the grant landscape happening right now. One of the things that is happening is, first of all, it's just incredibly competitive. Even though there are a lot of dollars out there right now, it is very competitive, and the funders are wanting to fund projects that are a lot of times connecting transit to centers, to really high density urban centers. Those tend to be like almost a sure shot when they apply. So think of places like Shoreline. They're doing a lot of work to connect light rail to their centers, and they're getting a lot of grant funding to do that. And so it's really hard sometimes to come with a project that is mostly centered around getting vehicular capacity, increased. It just doesn't look as appealing to the funders.
It's not the trend.
It's kind of a trend that we're seeing kind of unfold in front of our eyes. And so we're trying to be more competitive in the sense of being more multimodal focused, more focused on safety, those kinds of things, because those are very appealing to the funders, as you kind of alluded to. And so we're kind of turning the freighter around, I think, suffice it to say. But I think we'll get there. This is an interesting year for the TIP because, as we mentioned earlier, we're working on a comprehensive plan update. We're going to be creating a long-range system completion plan, which will look at a 20-year capital project list for transportation. So we'll be able to prioritize not only the near term, but the long-term projects, and really kind of be more future oriented and kind of thoughtful in how we do this. And so this TIP right now, we don't have a lot of that information. And so we're kind of viewing this as like a bridge year, where it kind of bridges us to that point in time where we're doing a better job of, planning essentially. And so all of that to say that we'll get there. I think it might just take us maybe a couple of years to the point where we're really competitive in those grant funding cycles.
Well, I think that that's important information for us to understand, because we just have to be smart about this. We don't have sexy projects. We just don't. But we do have safety issues. And I do think that we have a good shot on the safety stuff and flood. So I think, I think it's going to be just, picking our battles and winning on where we can win, and being clear about where our strong suit is. If we're good at that, let's do that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, to your point, that is kind of how TR 100 came about, is that we had a good opportunity. We went for the funding and we got the funding. And so now we're committed to doing that project, and it's going to be, a good win for the city once we can get that constructed. So yeah, we definitely have to take our wins and make sure that we're just ready and well positioned when funding comes available.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the work on this.
Yeah, thank you. Great questions.
Councilmember Trine?
Audrey.
Sorry, Scott. Yeah.
Mayor, if I could, apologies, Councilmember Trine. I want to, just quickly follow up on Councilmember Howe's line of questions really quickly. And I want to highlight one piece that Councilmember Howe brought up. And that is that one of the reasons for option 2 in part is the more focused we are and the more prioritized we are, the easier it is. Then we'll know what we should be going after grants for. But I was clear with the team on this, and I want to be clear with all of you that we're not going after grants for the sake of grants. We're going after grants that match our priority projects so that we can move them forward. So there might be times where a grant's available and we don't go after it, primarily because, as Doug said, if we receive the grant, we are committing to all the rest of it. So we have to know that that's where council's priorities are. This rolls over into our, for instance, legislative priorities and what we share out with our elected officials at the state and federal level. So that's in part why I want us to be really crystal clear about what we're prioritizing and where we're going to spend our efforts going after grants to match the projects that we've already identified as priorities. So I appreciate that, Mayor. Thank you. And thank you, Councilmember Trine. Apologies.
Well, and you may have stole Audrey's thunder here, because my question to Audrey was, where's the team sit on this? When in the back room, when you guys are sitting there and talking about which one, option 1 or option 2, which one does your team talk about that we think this works best?
Thank you, Councilmember Trine. I will say thank you, City Manager. You summed that up perfectly. So regarding the grant conversation, I think it's really how council looks at viewing things, right? I mean, we have our tip amounts right now are less than 10% of our project costs, and that's without right of way. And either $20, they will only get more expensive. And so it's really a council policy decision and where they want to go. Option 2 provides a little bit more opportunities to fund some of the smaller projects that may we may be able to complete in a much shorter window. The corridor projects are fantastic. We need to do some more work on those to understand how the corridor should function with our climate action plan, with the transit plan, with all these different inputs coming in the comprehensive plan. So, and again, it's a bridge year, so it's definitely a choice for council, and we would really have enjoyed hearing your thoughts and questions about it, but a lot of differences. If we do go on option 1, we're just going straight down the list, right? And we will quickly run out of money. So if we go with option 1 for the long term, we may want to look at making some policy decisions for reaching certain milestones for certain projects, because the first 4 projects on that list are several $100 million. So option 2 just gives council a little bit more, options within the options, if you will.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Thanks for the presentation. I definitely prefer the second option. It's really great to be able to touch more categories and more projects versus just, putting them all together. I'm going to go back to sidewalks. I did this last time. Maybe I'm just hyper-focused on sidewalks. I drive past so many different areas that are just missing sidewalks. I just notice it's so much more than road issues. How much does $200,000 buy us in terms of, I don't know, length of sidewalk?
I'd have to consult with the engineering team, but I think it's not a lot. It's about 1,000 lineal feet, maybe up to 2, depending on improvements. So it's not a lot, but this program, like all of our programs, are designed to be able to hopefully bundle design. So it does create some efficiencies so we can get some design work bundled and then maybe, go to construction for some of these gaps in the following year. So by having these small projects within the programs, it does have some cost savings there, but that's why we've really limited that program in terms of the project costs to be around $350,000. We also want to makes it easier for us when we go out for contract procurement as well. We can utilize a small works roster if the project size is smaller.
Did I hear correctly? It was 2,000 linear feet?
I need to double check with the teams if I have it in a note somewhere, but it's not a whole lot. So
that's very little.
Expensive.
I think a good way to think about it is that you're going to get to fill a couple gaps, short gaps in sidewalk. So think of the Inglewood Hill Road, kind of as you're going down the hill toward the Parkway. On the north side of that road, there's a small gap. It's like maybe a 3-block gap, something like that. It's the small gaps that you'll be able to fill.
That's really too bad. Is there any, I don't know what else we can do. I'm looking at all these numbers. I don't know how we can move things around. Is that even possible? Can we take a percentage from everything and put it in the sidewalks?
I think you're identifying the problem that we've really struggled with over these last few weeks, is that the funding landscape is very constrained. We have essentially no more than about $5.3 million per year to spend on any project for transportation capital. So this whole tip, we have about 5.3 per year. And so, that sounds maybe like a lot, but it's actually, once you start looking at what we've already committed to, like Scott mentioned with the grants, you know, we've committed ourselves to certain projects, that money goes really fast. And so we did our best to make sure everything balanced as close as it could to the annual assumptions. That's not to say that we can't move things around. It just won't be a whole lot that you can play with, given what we've already committed ourselves to. And the numbers might seem a little specific, and that's partly because we're looking at what it costs for design, and that's a certain percentage of an overall project cost. So they actually, there is some logic behind each of those numbers that we're assuming that when we're doing design, that we're going to allocate the appropriate amount for that. So it is a little bit hard. It's kind of like squeezing a balloon. But we can definitely look at that if there is direction from the council to kind of maybe look at a higher funding for TRC, which is the Sidewalk Gap Program. That's something we can definitely look at. I don't know if it's going to be something that we'll come back on June 6th and wow you with. It might be kind of a marginal increase given the landscape that we're in.
If I may just add on to that as well, we'll be working on the TIP in the next few weeks, but we also want to bring back a plan that we can deliver on with our resources in-house, and we can deliver on to the community. Another thing, a consideration with the TIP as well, I believe it's next on the agenda, is the fiscal sustainability plan, right? All those things go hand in hand. And so this, again, is a bridge year for the TIP. We'll be doing a lot of work with our long-range system completion plan, all of these planning efforts that are kind of tie in together. So we may be able to identify another, revenue source for some of these programs in the future as well.
Okay. Will we at least see like a prioritization for the sidewalks, given how little we have? I think we will, right?
Yes, and we have, I think, 13 or 14 projects that fall within that program right now, and they have a range of costs all below $350. And we did talk about that criteria a little bit last week. It's a little bit different so that we can kind of hone in on those smaller scale projects and be able to prioritize those. If we use the same criteria that we do for all of the big projects in the TIP, they'd all end up with kind of the same score. So it doesn't help us prioritize. So but yes, we can bring back some details on that if you'd like to see that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Councilmember Treen definitely asked my question because it seems like option 1, corridors just float to the top basically automatically. So I'm definitely for option 2, and I would like to make the motion unless Councilmember Stewart has something additional to add.
I did, actually. And then I'll pass it back to you. One, I think just emphasizes when we do projects, and I don't know if this is a policy decision or if you guys can do this on your own, but as we look at projects, we should look to see if there's a gap, right? Can we include that in the larger project, right? Again, in the past, I'll take Northeast 8th, right, leading up to Big Rock Park. I think there's like 10 feet where like the road got widened and we put in a sidewalk and we put in a shoulder, and then as it came up to the intersection, it curves back out and there's no shoulder again. Like when we design our projects, we need to try to design them and factor in so that we don't leave a gap in the first place, right? So that's one thing that I'd love to see us do. And again, I don't know if you need policy direction from council to be able to do that, or if that's something you guys can do on your own. 2, on that top part, again, I think we really need to look at all the different lists we have, and where there's any that are on more than one list, give that a higher score and start to do that, because then you can combine your funds and we might be able to get more out of it. And then 3rd, just for a little humor, maybe we need to start having ribbon cuttings for designs, and then we can get more grants for those.
Well, we would love that.
Thanks. Back to you, Mayor.
Yeah, that's one plan. All right, so yeah, I move to, I guess, move forward with option 2 for our public hearing in whatever month that was, June, July?
June 6th.
June.
Second.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, thank you, everyone. Are you guys off the hook for the night? Yes, I think you are, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you for earlier. I think city manager will talk about Rigapalooza, so thank you.
Of
Have a
course,
good
thank you.
evening.
You too.
Thank you so much.
let's do the consent item before we take a break and move to new business, that number 3, because I know David's getting queued up. Councilmember Stewart, I don't know if you want to start with your question. I think you also emailed it to us, maybe, if that's the same.
I did, yeah. So when I looked through the matrix with the answer, it didn't seem to jive with the information that had been presented.
Good evening, Mayor David Pyle, Department of Community Development. We are waiting for Jackson Dove from Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District to be promoted. I see him arriving right now. He will be able to help answer any questions that might come up. And he was one of the staff, the staffers at Sammamish Plateau Water that primarily worked on the plan with their consultants, so is very familiar with all the different components of the plan. And there he is.
Great. So I was just trying to connect all the dots, right? So back in 2021, Sammamish Plateau Water came and presented to us short, mid, and long-term strategies to address and generate, ERUs, right? And I just wasn't able to kind of tick and tie all of the information that we've received over the last 2 years with what I saw there. And it may very well be there, and I just didn't make those connections, but I wasn't seeing the math add up on the short, or the immediate and the midterm projects. Like, what specifically are those? Are those built into the comp plan? How far does that get us? And then do we still have, for a long-term plan, I thought that there were sort of 2 options. If the northern diversion doesn't get funded by a certain point in time, you'll start to look at going south. Is that still the plan? And that's what I was just trying to understand.
Yeah, so the answers to the questions in there, we included those projects. So there's the immediate improvements. Those have been completed as of November 2022 and provided 694 ERUs additional in the north service area. The interim phase 1 improvements are scheduled to be completed pretty soon in May of 2024, and will provide an additional 694 ERUs in the north sewer service area. And then the interim phase 2 are scheduled to be completed by October 2024 and will provide an additional 694 ERUs. And we also provided, we present to our board a monthly capacity report. And that kind of shows the additional capacity being added by those immediate and interim improvements compared to what is currently in the pipeline in terms of projects that we've issued certificates for new developer extensions, as well as obligations we have under a commitment to town center development. And so we tried to show that as well.
And while you're, so in the report that you provided, when it says in March of 2023 there were 0 new, that's not a cumulative, that just means specifically in the month of March then? Because I kind of got confused. I was like, well, it says that you completed 694 already, but I might have just misinterpreted that.
Yeah, so the first dotted line, we've reached that milestone of the immediate improvements. Those are online.
Okay.
So that is our current capacity as of November 2022. We expect to hit the next line in May of 2024, and then the higher line in October 2025. And the added connections is kind of the dark red line. That's the current level, like, of connections. The dark blue is pipeline, so projects that we've issued certificates for, but are currently in design or construction. So we expect those to come online in the next 5 years. And then the light blue is specifically what we've committed to for the Southeast Fourth sewer project, and will be developed with Town Center. So, so that would likely be still several years out before those come online.
Okay, that's really helpful because I don't think I quite grokked that from the picture. So we currently, in total, only have about 3,500 ERUs in use, and we'll have another roughly 2,000 more by the time interim phase 2 is done. So that's like, from a percentage-wise, that's a lot, right? I mean, that's like 80-ish, 90% more than what we currently have today.
Yeah, these projects are bringing on a lot of capacity. It depends on which, so there's 3 different basins that there's graphs for, so it depends on which basin you're looking at.
Okay.
So Central and North Lake are kind of the limiting basins, but even in those are, it's adding quite a bit of capacity in the interim. And again, this is only the North Sewer Service area. This is only a portion of the city, the South Sewer Service area. We do not have any limitations on the growth there. So this is a subset of the entire city.
Okay. So I guess where I get confused again is you have the same number of additional ERUs on all 3 graphs, but the number in use is different per basin. So it doesn't show for those interims where they're adding them, like which basin they're adding them to, does it?
So the way the sewer system works is the lift stations are chained. So Inglewood flows into North Lake flows into Central.
Okay.
So the capacity issues are compounded further downstream. So these are, anywhere you add them in the North Sewer Service area, the effects are shown at the 3 different lift stations. So, so Central Lake lift station is the most downstream lift station. So that one is limiting in capacity. So, but we're showing it at all 3 lift stations.
And I know you're not making any commitments here, but just in rough math, because I know ERUs don't really equal housing units and all of that. Do we think we have enough to cover what we're looking at in terms of our new growth targets that we're looking at in our, and I know you guys didn't have to design to our new comp plan, but I'm just trying to get a sense of like, when do we hit a collision point potentially? Is it like sooner or is it later?
So we think we're being conservative in the district's numbers. We're planning on 4,631 additional ERUs in the city of Sammamish by 2040. And I think that was approximately the same as the planning horizon on the city's numbers.
So just to clarify, our growth target as adopted by the King County Council through the CPPs is 2,100 units by 2044.
Right.
The affordable housing allocation that is currently under review by the King County Council that was recommended by the King County Growth Management Planning Council under motion 23-1 is 2,100 units of affordable units under 80% AMI with a cluster down around 0 to 30% AMI. And the city's capacity currently exceeds, I can't remember what it is, I believe it's 3,482. I want to say, don't quote me on that, it's somewhere in that range. And that is the result of the urban growth capacity study plus the balance of the unbuilt town center units under the 2,000 unit cap in the EIS. What we're looking at, if you recall from some past presentations, and we'll be hearing more about this soon, under some of our land use scenarios, is that in order for us to meet the affordable housing targets, or excuse me, affordable housing allocation that we believe King County Council will ultimately adopt through amendment of the King County countywide planning policies, is that we will need to provide additional market rate units in addition to the 2,100 units in order to show that we can incentivize the range of affordability by allowing additional market units to be built. So we could be somewhere in the 4,000 range. It could be up to 6,000. It could be down to 3,000. It really depends on the council, on the community, and what their preferences are, and also on our ability to show the math and how it works and get certification for our comprehensive plan. So I believe that that is within range. It certainly is within range until Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer updates their sewer comprehensive plan again in 2028. And they will start that work, I believe, Jackson, you can clarify, sometime in 2026 in order to hit the 2028 date.
Yeah, we will. It's every 6 years. So, so sometime around then. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Would you like to?
I would like to make a motion that we approve the SPW comp plan.
Second. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Thank you so much, Jackson, for hopping on. Thank you, David.
Thank you. I'll see
All
you again
right.
later.
All right. Let's take 10. So we'll be back at 8:45 on to new business. Thank you. Yeah, I can pass it on to Scott too. Oh, he's unmuted now. So we're moving on to the fiscal sustainability plan contract. So Mike and Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. And I've asked Mike to do the presentation, and then I'll be available to answer questions afterward. Mike, if you would.
Absolutely. Give me one moment to share my screen. Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. Mike Suggs, Supervising Management Analyst for the City Manager's Office. As Scott mentioned, tonight I'm here to give an overview of the contract that's in your meeting packet that will complete the Fiscal Sustainability Plan project. By way of background, during the budget deliberations in the fall of 2020, Council identified a need to review the city's long-term financial outlook to ensure that the city's budget would be sustainable into the future. Council subsequently funded a consultant to perform this work, and in July 2021, the city retained the firm Management Partners to do two main things. The first was to create a long-range forecasting model using 10 years of historical financial data, and that was completed and presented to Council in October of 2021. The second was to use that forecasting model to develop the Fiscal Sustainability Plan, which contains strategies to ensure the city would be fiscally sustainable 10 years into the future. And a draft of that plan was completed and presented to Council in June of last year. The plan is still in draft form as the project was delayed while we finished adopting and implementing the current 2023-2024 budget. With the budget in place, we are now in a position to finish out the project, which involves three main components. The first is updating the forecasting model with the most recent data from our current budget, in addition to incorporating Council's direction from June of last year to maintain staff and resource levels of service. The second is to engage a resident advisory task force to recommend potential budget strategies, which we'll discuss on the next slide. And then the third is obviously to finalize the fiscal sustainability plan. As mentioned on the previous slide, the city manager is recommending creating a resident task force to review and recommend budget strategies. The task force is important in that it will increase transparency, create community buy-in, incorporate local knowledge, and ensure that more effective and sustainable outcomes are created. The city manager is proposing a 9-member body made up of 3 city commissioners, 1 from each of the Planning, Parks, and Human Services Commissions, 1 large and 1 small business owner that will be selected in partnership with the Sammamish Chamber of Commerce, and then 4 community members at large, which will be selected by the city manager through a brief application process. The goal being to select 4 residents that represent a diverse cross-section of the city, geographically, economically, and through a DEIB lens. This 9-member task force will meet throughout the summer and present their recommendations to the city manager and ultimately the city council in the fall. The slide here shows the timeline that's recommended by the consultant, Baker Tilly. In June, we will finish appointing members to the task force, and then the task force will hold 4 meetings starting in June and wrapping up in August. In September, council will receive and deliberate on the task force's recommendations and the fiscal sustainability plan as a whole. So the recommendations for tonight are: 1, for council to authorize the contract with Baker Tilly, included as Exhibit 1 in the agenda bill, and 2, to provide any direction to the city manager on the task force model and structure that's being proposed. With that, I will stop talking and hand it over to the mayor if there's any questions or discussion.
Great, thank you, Mike. Councilmember Howe?
Sorry, I do have questions about the task force. I'm a little concerned that this cross-section of individuals aren't going to be able to deliver the type of information and feedback that we might require. And I wonder if the plan itself wouldn't inform what kind of a task force we needed. So if it's, plan first, task force second. And the reason why I'm thinking about this is that having led biz dev and market development in the US and abroad, those are the kinds of people that I would be looking to as experts in retail, experts in social retail, experts in business development, expert in economic development. Those are the people I want to tap into. I'm not sure what a general member of the population is going to contribute. So if you could help me understand that, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Councilmember Howe. Appreciate the question. I think the goal and the notion is that we want to share out with a cross-section of residents what the problem is, if you will, and then what options are available, and to have and to share that out, have the group work with it. One of the things that this consultant has done in the past is with other cities in the area has done the same sort of process, and it allows the group to sort of mix and match and take the bigger building blocks and play around with them and say, what does it look like if we do this or that, or we add this or that? And so it's an opportunity to educate and then come back and have that group give, it would be a recommendation to me technically, but we would present it to the council to say, so we're not looking for necessarily a truly sort of purely technical review group. It would be more about educating a group, a cross-section of residents, and walking through the information that we have, and then walking through what's available and what things they might recommend that we do. And we bring that back for council deliberation at that point about where council wants to go with finalizing the plan. So it would just be a recommendation.
Well, forgive me, that sounds like a focus group. So you'd get recommendations on how to maybe articulate certain aspects of what we're trying to go forward with, and that may have some purpose or value later. I think for me it's more of a I am interested in the technical expertise. I am interested in the ability to actually deliver a really outstanding economic development package that we're able to point to, so that we are not a one-trick pony town where we live and die based on property taxes. So I am very invested in making sure that we are getting the best minds together that can really consult and contribute, as opposed to understand and disseminate. So that is more where my attention is, but I'd be really happy to hear what other people have to say, because that's just my initial reaction.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I think I share similar concerns. I think this is a really, really, really big problem. And to pull together a group of people, some folks off the street for 3 months and think that they're going to solve all of our problems is not totally realistic. So understanding what's the scope. Are we going to ask them, hey, here are some like we saw before, some very high-level ideas of new revenue sources, and that's what they're going to focus on? Are we going to ask them to go look at all of our levels of service to decide what we can cut? I mean, there's just a million different things that go into this that I don't know that this group can come back and do that. So maybe getting some more information on what it is we're going to really ask them to do specifically. I'm fully supportive of getting this done. I mean, we've been asking for this for, I think, a year, and we know it's really critical. I mean, we know that we have been pulling money from our general fund to fund our operations for a while, and that we can't sustain that. So it's definitely important work. I think I'm willing to fund whatever we need to do that. I'm not clear on what the scope of what you're going to show them and what you're going to ask them for input on and how that's going to help to inform us, because I think there are 3 or 4 different dimensions to this.
Yep. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate the point. Not disagreeing. This is important work. And to your point, I think that we are for certain. I think that everything would be on the table as part of that group's review, both potential recommendations for reductions as well as potential recommendations for revenue increases and revenue diversification. To get to Councilmember Howe's question, I think. From my perspective, at the end of the day, I think this would be, we're not talking about a detailed line-by-line review. This would be a higher level review for sure, but that there is also the components that are built into that are, you can get down into more of those levels that you would need to discuss what it looks like if you turn the dial this way or that. And I think there's a tool that, and I'm blanking on the name of the tool, and Mike, maybe you remember the tool that Steve was referencing, but that you can actually, it's basically you can do scenarios, if you will. Yeah, that could be. I'm blanking on what it is.
So Scott, but like, I mean, when I think about the complexity, like, well, one way to reduce our future spending is, well, let's just cut all of our climate action work and let's cut doing any implementation on the urban forestry management plan. I'm obviously being very extreme. I wouldn't recommend that, but those are expensive things that don't align with our priorities. So again, how many options are you going to give them in terms of what they can choose to cut? They could say, hey, we're not even going to attempt to meet our affordable housing allocations, and then we can save a whole bunch of money there too, right? Like, we'll just cut all the staff, all the consultants and staff working on those parts of the comp plan. So, and I'm being extreme on purpose because I think it is very complicated and there's a lot. So understanding how many, to what degree are those dials? Are they bigger blocks? Are we talking about like Duplos versus Legos, right? Where it's like, hey, what if we implemented a utility tax? What if we had, less events? I mean, are you talking about it on that level, or are you going to get into all of the different complexities, and where does it have to align to the council priorities? And what about the mandates that we have and the legal pieces? Like, how do they get up to speed on all of those things to turn those dials in just 3 months?
Well, it is a unique challenge. However, I do, to your point, and I think Councilmember Howe was alluding to this somewhat, is that we will be operating within the constraints that we have in front of us today, which is we have requirements, we have state laws, we have council goals and direction. And so it would be within that construct, we would look at those things, and those would be the things that, within that, obviously there are different levels of, for instance, funding or levels of service. That might be one way to think about it. And I think that those things are important to share out and be transparent about when we go into this, as well as what does it look like and what might you spend dollars on if you were to do, to find new and diverse revenue sources and choose to act on those. And when might you want to act on those based on what the plan looks like. And I think those are the kinds of pieces that we're looking at reviewing as part of that plan to come back with that 10-year look to say, year 1, you might do something, year 3, year 5, year 7, whatever it might be, in order to reach that point.
And we think that the timing is right to have them do it first and then bring to us, or should we be taking a first pass at it and then seeing how the community reacts to what we think would best align with our priorities and how we think we can best achieve those.
Well, Councilmember, as I'm the one that recommended this, as you might expect, I'm going to say that taking the first run at it with this group is a way to flesh it out a little bit more, do some educating, and then you'll have a group of folks that have a really, it won't be detailed, but it will be a base level understanding about both what makes up our budgets and how it works. And then to come back and offer you something for you all to take. If council so chooses, we could go the other way around, and then you could take it out and we could walk it out to the community. That is for you all to decide, but this was the proposal that I had to allow us to go do some of that hard work and come with some, possibly even some options for you to consider, to help narrow that window down a little bit, but also to show out there might be some ideas that we all haven't thought about yet that might be great for us to consider.
And where does this pick up? Because we already had a contract with these folks and had a whole laundry list of options. So I guess I'm curious, don't we already have a starting point?
We do have a starting point, and this is where bringing in this group to say, here's the starting point. Let's really talk that through and think about what else might be done. And again, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, and we're not trying to deep dive. This is higher level pieces, but it is a way to say, let's look at the whole problem holistically. Take a review at it, and then come out and say, here's what this group thinks. And they're recommending to me, so again, this would be my ultimate recommendation to you all for your consideration and review and discussion. So if council chooses to go a different direction, I'm open to hearing that.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
So is this plan, the fiscal financial sustainability plan, is this modeled similar to how we did the climate action plan? Because, we had a consultant and then we had a citizen advisory group. So is this plan going to be completed in the same way that we have Baker Tilly? And then they're going to be working with staff. And that was kind of another question I had, because I didn't see the finance department anywhere in this plan. So would Baker Tilly be working with the finance department and you and to come up with an overall plan? And then that would be presented to the fiscal sustainability task force and get their feedback before it comes to council. Is that the plan?
Correct. Yeah. Obviously, apologies. If my name's on it, that means everybody that works for me is going to be included, including obviously the finance department. So yeah, they'll be intimately involved as part of that. And again, this is just a path forward. It's one path. You all could choose to go a different one, but that's the path that I think gives us the opportunity to walk through these things with a group of folks. From my humble estimation, we have really sharp, smart residents, and I think that getting folks in a room and allowing them to work with this stuff, they'll be able to pick up at the high level. I think that they'll be able to grasp onto it, and we can work through these things and come up with some ideas and concepts and what a plan might look like. Because what we finished with previously was it was a draft plan, but I think the next step would be to take that and really move it forward, and that's what this group, I'm proposing this group does.
Okay.
Councilmember Annapuré?
Thank you, Mayor. I am actually very excited about the prospect of having the community be educated and then also contribute to this plan for the economy and for fiscal sustainability in Sammamish. I recall there used to be a finance committee which had which was, I think, headed by maybe a council member a few years back. This is before 2017, I think. So we have that sort of history in Sammamish. I'm curious to know sort of what were some of the pros and cons of that committee when it was there. But to sort of echo Councilmember Howe and Stewart's points, I feel like it's going to be extremely challenging for this committee to come up with something substantive. In 3 months, it's a lot of time to learn And so I think having a good framework and parameters within which they can sort of operate would be great. And I'm glad to see that there will be staff support for them. I think another caution, which I think has already been said before, is that we don't want to burden the citizen committee with coming up with policy. I think the policy has to come from the council and not from them. So any decisions, and I'm sure Scott, you'd be very on top of that, is that we shouldn't, burden them with creating policy decision. That is really our role and responsibility, and that is what we should stick with. So thank you.
Councilmember Trine.
So, thank you, Mayor. Fiscally sustainable, that's what the objective is to have a city, a model. So, okay, here's my question. Is it a model, right? It's a model that you're looking to build.
No, Councilmember Trines, the model was built previously, and then it's the inputs that you put into that. The sustainability plan would be a 10-year look at bringing the city in onto a sustainable path where it could maintain itself over
Right, so
time.
we already paid for the model.
The model has been completed, correct?
Yeah, and so this task force then would be, here are some inputs into the model, which would have some outcomes then, which should show on a graph that we are sustainable. So the lines don't cross on the spreadsheet. Okay, so if that's what the task force is going to help you to do, I believe, actually I don't even believe, I know that within the city of Sammamish there are hundreds of people who could help build a model, or to show how the model could be sustainable within the city over a period of time. And in this case, we think 10-year, at least conversations I have had with Aaron, Anton, and the council has had with staff here in open public meetings, is that there is a way to do that. And so having a group of residents and people we've put on boards and commissions to work on this, I think they'd be chomping at the bit to get to work and help you figure it out. So I'm in support of the plan. I'm just kind of surprised it hasn't happened sooner. So thank you.
So I actually agree with Councilmember Trine. I think, when I look at this, we do have the professionals. That is that consultant group. I trust the city manager and the consultants to lead this group, this advisory group, whatever we're going to call it, focus group, advisory, task force. I don't know what we're calling it now. I think it's a great way, education, involvement. We don't have a lot of time. I can't imagine trying to do this between now and whenever this is coming back, trying to add to our agenda. And like Councilmember Trine said, we've trusted these people to be on boards and commissions. We have great business owners. We have a bajillion great residents. So from my point of view, I think I would rather, it's not they're making these decisions. It's not they're making things up. I think the Baker Tilly is going to have options for them to at least look at and think about to move forward. So I do support this contract. I don't know if there's any other questions, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah.
Are we just, I guess I see the whole thing lighting up again. I guess I don't want to go back and forth for another half hour. So I just want to make sure that we're actually adding new conversation. Councilmember Stewart.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things you list in here, you bring up that we trust the consultant. This consultant was never hired through an RFQ process, right? It was single sourced. And you mentioned in here that they've done work for other cities. Did we reach out to those other cities to make sure that those other cities found that the work they did was good and valuable and solve their problems? I mean, because just because you do work for somebody doesn't mean that was a positive. And why wouldn't we, since this vendor was originally brought in as a single source and never put out for RFQ, at some point would we go out to make sure we've got the best folks working on this?
Appreciate that, Councilmember Stewart. We met with for instance, the Kenmore city manager. We sat down and talked with them. They did the same process with the city of Kenmore. Kenmore has had a plan in place, and they've been walking through their plan sort of verbatim since they completed the work. They worked with the city of Newcastle and the city of Mercer Island as well, just here in the King County area. Since they started the work and they've been working on it, I feel like they're the right ones to finish it out.
And Newcastle and Mercer Island were also happy with their work?
Yes.
Okay. And Aaron's happy with them? I don't know.
I saw the thumbs up.
Okay. And then my last thing was just to respond. So we did used to have a finance committee. And it was, they were open to the public, but it was council members. So it was the finance department meeting with council members, going through things in more detail, and then that group of council members bringing recommendations with the finance department forward to the council. So it was not a citizen-run or citizen-led group.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
Yeah, I didn't mention it in my questioning that I did support this plan. Thank you.
Councilmember Howe?
The question I have has to do with the ability to actually find these people that you want to put onto this board. I actually think it's harder than has been proposed here, because typically people that are good at this kind of work make money doing it. They're consultants and they have a very high rate, and they're not going to do it for free. So that's one barrier. You do have some folks that might be willing to contribute sometime, but 3 months, that's a long time. So I have just a question. So what happens if you can't find these people, or do you already have a short list?
Thank you, Councilmember Howe. Just to clarify, it's four meetings with a council presentation. So I appreciate the time commitment. It's, we'd be upfront with people. In terms of, I don't have a short list. One of the things that I wanted to do was to ask all of you if you know of someone that might be interested. When we get we're going to have a quick application set up that people can just send their application in to ask you all to talk to folks that you know and ask them to if they'd consider being a part of it. I think it's why I wanted to keep that particular number not too big, so we weren't. I think we can get to 4 folks. I think that's doable. And if we don't, then we will pivot and try something else. But I think we can get to 4 fairly quickly.
So I think yours is yeah, that's right. So I don't know if anyone would like to make a motion or have further discussion on this one. Councilmember Treen?
Yeah, I make a motion to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract, which is Exhibit 1 with the Baker Tilly, to complete a fiscal sustainability plan in an amount not to exceed $22,000. And then second, to provide direction, we provide direction to the city manager on the approach to that fiscal sustainability task force model and structure.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Is that 1? All right, 5-1. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Scott. Okay, and I think David Pyle is getting ready for the review of the draft greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled reduction strategies.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. David Pyle, Department of Community Development. For agenda item, I think it's number 16 tonight. Let's see. Yeah. I guess it's number 17 now with the revised agenda, related to review of draft greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled reduction strategies. Tonight we have with us our consultants from Brightworks. They're being promoted to panelist status, and while they do so, I'll introduce them. We have Chris Forney from Brightworks, and we have Aaron Hawking from Brightworks as well as Miriam Leitner, the city planning manager. What we're going to do here is provide a presentation from Brightworks, who will walk you through the information that then will allow for a period of question and comment, and hopefully we'll be able to wrap up with some direction so we can bring this back to you for consideration of an approval in June. With that, I'll turn it over to Aaron, and I don't know, Aaron, are we expecting Chris tonight as well, or are we trying to move him into panelists at this point?
No, just myself.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Yes. Okay. So we can go ahead and get started. Good evening, and thank you for having us. As David mentioned, we will be discussing today the proposed measures for transportation and energy related to the grant VMT and climate action plan. So for the agenda tonight, looking at some context, going back and refresher on how we got to this point, the different steps and processes that we have been through, the process in determining these measures, so how these measures were evaluated and presented to the City Council here tonight, the proposed measures, so providing an overview, timeline and next steps, and then some time at the end for any questions. So goals for today, today's focus is to provide an overview of the measure development process, provide relevant context, and confirm the City Council understanding of these measures. Brightworks will share proposed transportation and energy measures for the City of Sammamish GHG VMT strategy and comprehensive plan. This evening, Brightworks is not collecting detailed feedback on each measure, rather inviting written feedback to be submitted via JOT form by Monday, May 22nd. We will work with the City of Sammamish to incorporate the comments that you all provide to us via the JOT form. So at the conclusion of the presentation, we would like your questions about the process behind measure development, who was consulted, and how feedback was integrated into the proposed measures, questions around how these proposed measures fit into the overall context of the climate program grant and climate action plan, and next steps after these measures are reviewed. So moving into a little bit of context around these measures, the measure scope that we are looking at today, we are presenting measures related to transportation and energy. These categories are the most material for the GHG emissions and VMT reduction strategy timeline, and they are the most technically complex sections. So we wanted to allow extra time around transportation and energy for these reasons. These measures are critical path items for VMT reductions. Measures related to water, waste, natural environment, and resiliency, as well as a few other categories, will be presented in a second round of measure review. And these measures around water, waste, natural environment, resiliency, and others will apply to the CAP more broadly, but are not critical to the GHG emissions and VMT reduction strategy grant that is upcoming. So project phases, the first phase being baseline analysis, where we measured Sammamish's sources of emissions and opportunities for impact, evaluated regional emission frameworks and goals. That was kicked off late last year around and into January of this year. Measure development, so identifying reduction measures in alignment with K4C commitments that are applicable to Sammamish's emissions makeup, and conducting stakeholder engagement and community workshops. And then phase 3 will be the CAP development. And just to highlight, we are currently here within the measure development, and you can see along the bottom, happening concurrently is the development of the GHG VMT grant, comp plan integration, and then the overall City of Sammamish Climate Action Plan that is continuing through the year. So just one more way to look at it and a bit more context, want to present how the Grant VMT fits into the larger climate action plan. So as mentioned, the Grant VMT addresses transportation and residential energy emissions in line with the Commerce Grant. These pieces are integral and will be included in the larger climate action plan. The larger climate action plan, in addition to transportation and residential energy, will include both city-oriented and community-oriented strategies around that broader lens of sustainability. So wastewater, transportation, energy, and other measures will be included in the broader climate action plan, but not the Grant VMT. So just a refresher on the carbon emissions baseline for the City of Sammamish. We reviewed this last time we spoke with council, but just a reminder of how the emissions are stacking up. We have transportation on the bottom, electricity, and then natural gas. So you can see the makeup of emissions here, and this will feed into the way we look at strategies. So understanding what some of the priorities are for emissions reductions based on the emissions makeup of the city. So an updated goal, just as a refresher, the Sammamish City Council in March of 2023 approved the following goals related to VMT and GHG emissions. So the first one being reducing per capita vehicle miles traveled, or VMT per capita, 30% by 2030 and 50% by 2050 as compared to a 2016 baseline. That second goal being reducing GHG emissions at least 50% by 2030, 75% by 2040, and 96% by 2050 from a 2019 baseline. And you'll recall that this 96% is 1 degree higher than the K4C reduction goal, which is noted at 95% currently. So an overview of the process to date. As mentioned previously, January and February, we were focusing on baselining and measure development. March, we moved into stakeholder engagement. So getting feedback from key city stakeholders on proposed measures, which I'll provide a bit more context for in a minute, and incorporating the stakeholder feedback into these proposed measures. April, moving into my measure finalization or socialization of the measures. And then May and June, reduction plan development for the measures. Another overview of the engagement done to date. The process of refinement involves meetings with Planning Commission, City Council, and the Community Advisory Group. So just want to highlight that this has been an iterative and collaborative process of measure development, in which we've met with these groups multiple times and will continue to meet with these various groups. So that's to say that the measures that you all have received for review and we'll be discussing a little bit tonight are not, is not the last chance to provide feedback overall. It's not the final stage of engagement or measure development. Rather, it's just a look into the process and an opportunity to provide initial feedback, again, on anything that is unclear or may need more context around these measures. So an overview of the stakeholder engagement that went into this measure development. So here you will see the list of the different groups that we solicited feedback from. And what that feedback process looks like was distributing the draft measures in an Excel document to these various stakeholder groups and allowing room for comment. We allowed room for comment on individual measures either wording, context, and also allowing room to suggest additional measures. Brightworks took in that feedback and developed the draft measures that were first presented to Planning Commission and have been further refined for review tonight. So just wanted to provide a little bit of clarification around the process. This was from some initial feedback received from the Planning Commission and other groups. So the list of measures that you all received will be assessed and ranked further based on several additional factors. So rather than just having the list of measures, when we look to prioritize and implement measures, we'll be examining these measures through the lens of emissions reduction potential, ease of implementation, climate justice and equity, cost savings, economic recovery, and resilience. Measures will be categorized based on impact within the Climate Action Plan, which will have an implementation matrix intended to provide guidance and help the city to prioritize and put measures into action. Again, this round of feedback is intended to account for any gaps or lack of clarity present in the measures as they currently stand. Future revisions will account for specific language, nuance, co-considerations, and implementation logistics. So moving now into the measures themselves and a little bit closer look at how we came to the measures we have today. What you're looking at now is a screenshot of a tool provided by K4C, which is called the Return on Carbon Toolkit. This was developed to provide cities within K4C with the most impactful measures that they can take in each category of reduction and allow the cities to rank measures to ultimately determine the top most impactful measures that will make up the necessary emissions reductions to ultimately meet the reductions goal set forth by the city. So this was a starting out point as for a lot of the measures that we sent for feedback and kind of where these measures originated from. We wanted to ensure that measures were in alignment with K4C guidance and complementary to efforts that were ongoing within K4C. So another look at the measure development progression. As I mentioned, step number 1, draft measures were developed based on initial stakeholder feedback and K4C's Return on Carbon Toolkit. 2 weeks ago, we presented these measures to the Planning Commission for feedback. Since then, we have taken in the feedback that the Planning Commission has provided and further refined those measures. And those are the measures that you all received that we will be reviewing tonight for feedback before these measures are finalized. So to provide a bit of context to the way the measures are laid out and the different categories of emissions reductions measures, we can think of these within 4 quadrants. So we have the main categories being transportation and energy use measures. In transportation measures, we have both city transportation measures and community transportation measures. And in energy, we have city energy measures as well as community energy measures. And I'll give a bit more detail on the differentiation between city and community in just a moment. So as noted, the measures that we are reviewing tonight are grouped into 2 main categories aligned with material emission sources of transportation and energy, so both electricity and natural gas. Within each category, Brightworks has identified city measures and community measures for overarching programs. All measures will be included in the Climate Action Plan. Those relevant to transportation and residential energy will be included in the grant and comprehensive plan. So a bit more context about the city versus community measures. On the left-hand side, you'll see the description of city measures, which incorporate actions that the city of Sammamish, so city staff or planning, can undertake to directly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. These measures apply to government operations as well as actions directly under the control of the city of Sammamish. We're also looking at community measures. This is where we have been collaborating with the community advisory group to review measures that include actions that the city of Sammamish community will need to be involved in to ensure success. These measures incorporate actions that the city can support, but are not directly related to government operations within the city. So the next phase, we want to walk through an overview of the measures. So I won't read through each and every measures, but different sections and how they have evolved. So just a clarity here, we have some different icons to represent as we're going through the measures, whether it is a city or community measure, and also to indicate, as discussed, if it is a transportation or energy measure. So again, those 4 quadrants that we looked at a few slides ago. On the bottom, you'll see the distinction that there is some text in the measure review that is black text that indicates an existing measure that is similar to how it was when presented to Planning Commission, and green text is indicating new or adjusted measure or measure language. So moving now into the specific measures that you all have been provided, and starting first with the city transportation measures. Based on the Planning Commission feedback, some alterations that we have made is that we provided additional context to measure descriptions, added measure numbering, and added 1 additional measures. So what you'll see here is the measure itself. Supplementary to this that you all have access to now is a further measure description, which will give more detail into what each measure implies. So citywide commute reduction programs, the goal of this group of measures is to reduce emissions from commuting through related programs or commuting alternatives. The next section of this with an updated title of supporting electric vehicle citywide and advocacy. These city-specific actions are intended to reduce emissions from transportation through electric vehicle advocacy and programs. Just a summary of how these measures have been adjusted. We consolidated certain measures to eliminate redundancies, added measure numbering, renamed broad categories, and added 1 additional measure as well. Fleet vehicle best practice standard, we added measure numbering here and eliminated 1 measure with that was deemed to have a limited opportunity for impact within the city. Again, city-specific actions intended to reduce transportation emissions from fleet vehicle operations within the city's control. So jumping into community transportation measures, the update, since based on the Planning Commission feedback here, is provided additional context to measure descriptions, added measure numbering, and eliminated an additional measure with limited opportunity for impact, and added 1 additional measure. So the goal of this group of measures is to reduce emissions from commutes of those within the community by offering ways to reduce trips through infrastructure and other resources. I believe we've already received some great feedback from the City Council around transit-oriented development. So that is 1 thing we'll be looking at as we revise these measures further. Partnerships and education. These may include public transport services, freight operation partnerships, or other education. And again, a bit of refinement in the measure descriptions for this batch. Community-wide electric vehicles. This section includes incentives and advocacy, so measures around supporting EV infrastructure, as well as advocacy for state and regional policies. And community-wide advocacy, incentives and advocacy, so measures, again, supporting EV infrastructure, Based on the PC feedback, provided additional context to measure description, added numbering, and added 2 additional measures here around bike training and safety, as well as community transportation education programs. The city energy measures, again, looking at citywide energy efficiency. So this group of measures is focused on decisions that the city can control within its own operation relating to city halls and other office locations. Office actions include efficiencies, updated equipment, purchasing policies, and energy audits. Again, here we provided some additional context to the measure description and added some measure numbering for clarity. Codes and standards, this includes strengthening energy efficiency codes and other zoning incentives within the city. Low carbon electricity. So low carbon electricity includes establishing a baseline, which we are currently working on for the city operations, as well as enrolling in a green power program. You will see as well one additional measure included here is increasing renewable energy use across the municipal facilities. Finally, we have the community energy measures. So starting first, again, with low carbon electricity, here we added measure numbering and no changes to the measures or measures descriptions. These are focused around working with businesses to encourage enrollment in green power programs and developing ways to remove barriers for residential and small business solar. Again, energy programs added 1 measure and numbering here. The additional measures are focused on partnerships based on green infrastructure and energy efficiency home upgrade programs and incentivizing low carbon and sustainable materials in building projects. Finally, we have advocacy. You'll see 1 additional measure here, community energy conservation and greenhouse gas emission reduction education programs. Limited scope here to solely advocacy and moved code measures to the city measures. That was the adjustment based on the Planning Commission feedback, just based on where the Planning Commission felt that the most potential impact would be had, and added 1 measure as well as the measure numbering. So moving here into next steps around these measures and what is to come next in this process. So looking ahead, we have the immediate term energy and transportation measures will be integrated into the VMT and emissions reduction strategy for climate program grant. We're working on developing community engagement strategy to solicit feedback on measures and emission reduction strategies. In the longer term, we will be looking to engage the broader community around measures and emissions reduction strategies, as well as developing the climate action plan measures and reduction strategies. So another look at the timeline in a bit more detail, you can see where we are in April and May, where we are socializing the GHG VMT reduction measures, working on drafting the GHG VMT reduction strategy and comp plan integration. Where we're moving next will be adopting these GHG emissions and VMT reduction strategies, socializing these reduction strategies, and beginning our climate action plan community engagement workshops, and working on refining and finalizing the climate action plan from there. We wanted to give a bit more context as well as to what to expect in the next meeting that Brightworks will be attending, which is the June 6th City Council meeting. And this will be to review the Commerce Grant deliverable. So just again, a little bit more context of what to expect there from the Grant VMT deliverable. We will be providing an overview of process, goals, and measures related to transportation and residential energy emissions reductions. This will be in a more formal document rather than a presentation. So this document will include the background and baseline, strategies and actions, next steps, and implementation that will be submitted to Commerce. So City Council will receive this complete document in the packet for the June 6th meeting. During the June 6th meeting, we will review with a goal to approve this document. From there, I want to open it up to questions and just note one final time to please submit feedback on these measures via job form by May 22nd at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Alrighty, Councilmember Trine.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Aaron, can you send me page 16 of your presentation, please? And then also, I think if what you also presented, I'm going off the agenda information that we had, and I actually I sent you already some responses to the to the form, but I didn't have that piece of information on page 16. So if you'd send that to me, I want to resubmit some of my comments and some of the things that and questions that I had on your measures. Because now seeing your presentation, I kind of jumped ahead there, my mistake. Now seeing your presentation and knowing what you're asking us to do, it'd be nice to have this presentation, or at least page 16, please. Thank you.
Yes, we can provide that.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. Super excited about all of this. One question, so I think you said you're going to take what's in this presentation and start to socialize it. I guess my question is, are you going to have more specifics? Because I feel like generally what you have listed here, like philosophically, I kind of feel like everybody's going to agree, right? Like, yes, of course we should do all that. But as they like to say, the devil's in the details. So what does that really mean, right? So when you talk to people about, you know, using less of something or converting to something, what is that really going to mean? So will you have more details when you go out to get, you know, kind of input from the public?
Yes, so there will be more details. What you see in this presentation is a very high-level overview of what the measures are, but we'll get much more into the measure specifics, especially around implementation, co-benefits, risks, that type of thing. So we will be looking to include more details with further community engagement.
Great. Looking forward to that as well. And then the one question that that Phil brought up tonight around measuring the electric vehicles. All throughout this presentation, switching all of our vehicles, whether they be our cars or transit, you know, fleet vehicles to EVs, is obviously a critical part of this strategy. Is it true that we can't measure that, and so we can't measure the impact of switching cars from gas to electric?
So the point that electric vehicles were not necessarily captured as part of the baseline, that is accurate. The baseline was developed based on traffic counts and did not consider necessarily vehicle types, but it's not something that we feel could not be captured. When we're looking to incorporate these measures, one thing that we have been discussing is including improvement of data over time. So while we have the baseline and we look to track progress, we'll be looking to include the data through updated methodologies of getting accurate traffic counts and incorporating EVs, because it is an important part of strategy. So while not in the baseline, and we find the baseline to be conservative, as it is kind of assuming that you are not realizing the benefits of electric vehicles at this time, as we do, you know, look to improve data and continue measuring over time, improve data strategies can be part of that approach.
Okay, so I just want to get clarity. If we didn't measure how many EVs were in the 2019 baseline, then we can't measure our improvement, because you will overstate our improvement if in 2019 we assumed every car on the road was not an EV, and then suddenly 20% of our cars are EVs now, we're going to say we had a 20% improvement. But probably 10% of our cars were EVs already in 2019, so it's really only a 10% improvement. So just to be clear, I think we have to solve this problem, especially because I saw in at least 2 of the 4 quadrants that you listed on the high-level slide, converting to electric vehicles is part of the strategy. So we have to be able to measure that both in the baseline, even if we just make it a list of assumptions and some estimates on the baseline, it has to be included there, and we have to measure it going forward. I just don't understand if that's going to be one of our key strategies for transportation, how we aren't measuring that. So is that I know you said we're going to consider it, but I feel like we have to do a lot more than consider, yes?
So,
Yeah.
so we can, I am aware that there is data available. The data itself is not specific to zip code. You can break it down by zip code. You can break it down by vehicle type. And break it down by tabs issued every year based on vehicle type in zip code, which is interesting data. That in itself does not tell us how many miles each of those vehicles are traveling. There are assumptions that can be made. Yep. That's all helpful. So we could work on that. But also at the same time, there is a challenge in the category of where the energy use gets put, because if you're charging it from your home, is that now considered home energy use, or is that considered transportation energy use? I would say that because what we're going to see is that there's a spike, and it's trying to figure out where these all are going, and they're all interconnected.
And yes, there will be, right? When you stop driving your gas vehicle and you start charging at home, you will absolutely see an increase in electricity use. And so that puts an even bigger burden on making sure that the electricity we use is green. That's clearly where that's headed. So
I think we don't disagree by any means. We'll work on it, and we'll try and figure out what we can do with the data that's available. Talk to the transportation engineer and see how to integrate that into the baseline, the initial baseline that we set. I agree completely with Aaron saying, we strive to continue to improve our data over time, and that's something that will be part of the climate action plan. Is we're going to continue to do better with better data sources over time. So this is one we should fix now, though, because I do see what you're saying and agree that we don't want to create a false impression, much like our growth targets and our growth, that when we annexed Klahani, that it was all suddenly built, because it was there already. So where our starting point is very important. So I appreciate the comment. Thank you. And we will keep working on it and come back to you with hopefully something that integrates that into the baseline.
Awesome. And we can ask around too. Maybe somebody else has already sort of figured out how to do this. And then my last question, which is a little bit off topic, but if 46% of our greenhouse gas emissions are from natural gas, again, to quote Phil, I don't think we have to wait to be done to get started. Like, can we get started on the no more natural gas in new development development regulation like ASAP? Because clearly we have to stop digging our hole deeper. I mean, obviously we have to do a lot of conversions because we have a lot that's already out there, but we really should stop making that problem worse. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Thanks for the presentation, Aaron. I had a question on the timeline. I see that food waste in general, and the natural environment is coming in round 2. When is round 2 happening?
So I don't know if we have a specific date for that yet, but it should be in the fall, is my understanding of that timeline.
In the fall of this year?
Yes, of 2023.
Okay. And do we have, it's coming back, but in what form? Will there be similar to what your presentation is tonight, that there'll be a list of measures and we'll be reviewing those?
Yes, so this will be in a similar format where we draft measures. Those measures are being actually reviewed by the city staff currently. And we'll go through a similar process of gathering feedback from relevant stakeholders and then presenting to Planning Commission and Council for feedback. And again, like I said, I believe in the fall. I just am not sure if we have a specific date for that outlined at this time. I'm not sure, David, if you have one.
I can't recall offhand. There's a bunch of timelines circulating out there on different projects, so.
Yeah.
No, this is great. I was just concerned it was going to be in 2024. No, it's great.
I know that I am currently in review of it right now, so we're working on it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, Miriam, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do have some tentative dates. So we are slated to be back with City Council for review of the cap measures, the full set, on November 7th, and then for a public hearing on December 5th.
Thank you.
All right, Council, we have any more questions? And the job form came from Miriam, and we have till the
May
very
22nd
specific time.
at 9 a.m.
Yes, very specific time there. Yes.
That's the target. We understand that, might take a little bit longer. We would be hopeful that we could get them all in by then, because we then have to turn them around and work on them. But I understand there might be a few trickling in after that date and time.
Cool. And then you'll do something beautiful to come back so we can see everyone's questions, I'm sure, and answers.
Well, hopefully it will be beautiful, but yes, we will bring it back.
Awesome. Yeah. And that will be the 6th.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a very short timeline. Yeah, for you all. All right, Council, do we have any other questions on this? Great. Well, thank you, Erin and Miriam.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, so are you making Kelly do this, David, the next two?
Well, not making, but
Gladly.
Kelly has volunteered to support the next two items.
Nice.
So I will pass it over to her, where she'll be able to, once she's promoted to panelist status, she will offer the introduction and participate in the discussions, and I'll be here participating as well.
Awesome.
So once she's promoted, we'll be able to move into the new state legislation and impacts.
Cool. Actually, while we're hanging out here, how long, just thinking about extending.
So Kelly has worked really hard to create a very concise and direct presentation on both of these topics. So I'm guessing, Kelly, would you think 25 minutes on each of them?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So not as fast as Councilmember Howe's Pledge of Allegiance, but close. Yeah. So I move to extend the meeting, I'm just going to say to 11.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Kelly, go for it. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I think Jeff and I drew the short straws on where we landed on the agenda tonight. So we are also motivated to keep this within the time frame for tonight's meeting. With that said, and for the record, my name is Kelly Hildy. I am the Deputy Director of Community Development. Jeff Arango from Framework is joining me tonight, and he and his team are supporting us in the 2024 Comprehensive Plan update. Next slide. Tonight we will present an overview of 6 newly enacted bills from the 2023 legislative session, signed into law by the governor, and discuss their anticipated impacts on the 2024 periodic update to the comprehensive plan and associated development regulations. It is important to acknowledge that understanding the full extent of these legislative impacts will require several months, and any unanswered questions tonight will be duly noted and addressed in subsequent updates to City Council. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, and he is going to start us off with House Bill 1110.
Great, thank you, Kelly. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council members. Jeff Arango with Framework. And we're going to start our overview of the legislative results from the past session with House Bill 1110. It's perhaps the bill that has been publicized the most, and it has to do with middle housing in areas traditionally dedicated to single-family housing. The diagram you see on the bottom of the screen is a middle housing diagram produced by a firm named Opticos out of California. And basically it highlights what middle housing is, starting at detached single family homes in the white all the way to the left of the diagram, and then moving up in scale or intensity, including duplexes, fourplexes, courtyard buildings, cottage courts, townhouses, multiplex buildings, triplex, stacked and live work units. And then to the right is the mid-rise, which is outside of the middle housing range. And so this is really targeted at introducing middle housing opportunities within single family zones. And on the next slide, we have a little bit more information on the implications. The implications for the bill vary from community to community. And one of the major provisions is that cities between 25 and 75,000 population, which Sammamish falls under, must allow 2 units per lot, all the way down to lots of 1,000 square feet or greater, which is quite small. 4 units per lot must be permitted within 0.25 miles walking distance to a major transit stop, which is defined in the legislation, and Sammamish currently does not have a major transit stop within the community. And then we'll also be required to provide 4 units per lot if at least 1 unit is affordable housing. There are some areas that are exempt from the requirements. Those include critical areas, watershed areas, serving potable water, and then lots of designated urban separators by the countywide planning policies. Moving up in scale, cities over 75,000 population, of which Sammamish will reach, likely within the next 20 or so years, must allow 4 units per lot, 6 units within the major transit stop, and then 6 units if 2 units are affordable. So one of the questions we'll have for the council, doesn't need to be answered tonight, is whether we should start to plan for the 75,000 population threshold, which we will meet in the future. And then another piece of House Bill 1110 that maybe has gotten less attention, but is also impactful. Within the single family zones, cities must plan for 6 of 9 middle housing types. So there is some discretion in terms of which ones we would like to select. And this is another issue. We'll be looking for feedback from the council, and we'll be coming back in June with more information on the impacts of some of these options, as well as the other land use alternatives that we had presented previously. So the 6 of 9 middle housing types, and those include the types that I just described on the previous diagram. Homeowners association and common interest properties where they have exclusions or prohibitions on the construction of anything other than single family, those would be prohibited going forward. So any new HOA would not be able to have that provision in there. There's also an allowance for an alternative approach where 75% of the lots in single family zones are subject to the new density requirements. We have done an initial analysis that indicates that the critical areas alone encompass more than the 25% that we could exclude. So there already is some reduction in the land area that would be eligible to develop under these provisions. So just a brief summary of a couple of the questions I posed previously. Should we start to plan for the 75,000 threshold, or should we defer until the city reaches that threshold in the future? We would then be required to comply after the next progress report, which happens 5 years after the next periodic update, which will happen 10 years from now. And then we will need to identify the 6 of 9 middle housing types that we want to allow in the single family zones. And again, the range of options are those that I described previously. We do have until June 30th, 2025, so another 6 months beyond the deadline to complete the comprehensive plan update. But as you know, just the legislative process alone and outreach associated with that can take 4 to 6 months. So to the extent that we can fold this into the comprehensive plan update and the development regulations updates, I think it will be more efficient, but we do, if needed, have another 6 months to complete this work. Over to Kelly.
The next series of bills passed by the legislature this year focused on easing barriers and getting more housing built. Starting with Senate Bill 1337. 1337 requires cities and counties under the Growth Management Act to adopt regulations allowing for the construction of accessory dwelling units within urban growth areas. The bill prohibits certain regulations and restrictions on ADU construction while authorizing the adoption of measures that waive or reduce fees and taxes or offer incentives for ADU development. The bill also prohibits restrictive covenants or deed restrictions from prohibiting ADU construction in UGAs, but allows for restrictions related to public health and safety and on-site wastewater. The city's existing ADU development regulations will require amendments to accommodate the allowance of 2 ADUs per lot in single-family zones and the removal of owner residency requirements. The deadline for the city to amend its development regulations is June 30th, 2025. Next slide. House Bill 1293 requires counties and cities planning under the GMA to apply only clear and objective design review standards to the exterior of new development. For the design review process, a clear and objective regulation must include one or more discernible guideline, standard, or criterion by which an applicant can determine whether a given building design is allowed under the development regulations, and may not result in a reduction in density, height, bulk, or scale below the generally applicable development regulations for a development proposal in the applicable zone. As for project review, the city may only require pre-application conferences or a public meeting where otherwise required by state law. In addition, counties and cities are encouraged to adopt project review provisions that ensure an objective review and expedite project permit applications for projects that allow dwelling units that are affordable to low income and moderate income housing. To ensure compliance with this bill, the city must review and, if necessary, amend its development regulations by June 30th, 2025. Next. Okay. Senate Bill 5412 expands the infill development categorical exemption to include housing development. All project actions that propose to develop one or more residential housing units within the unincorporated areas in an urban growth area or middle housing within the unincorporated areas in an urban growth area and that meet certain criteria are categorically exempt from SEPA. Before adopting the categorical exemption, jurisdictions must satisfy the following criteria. The proposed development must be consistent with all development regulations implementing an applicable comprehensive plan under the GMA adopted by the jurisdiction in which the development is proposed, and the city or county has prepared an environmental analysis that considers the proposed use or density and intensity of uses in the area proposed for exemption and analyzes multimodal transportation impacts. The environmental analysis must include documentation that the requirements for environmental analysis, protection, and mitigation for impacts to elements of the environment have been adequately addressed for the development exempted. The city or county must document its consultation with the Washington Department of Transportation on impacts to state-owned transportation facilities, including consideration of whether mitigation is necessary for impacts to transportation facilities. Overall, this bill has minimal impact on the city. With that said, adopting a categorical exception would significantly benefit project permit applications for infill development by removing the requirement for discretionary decision-making. To maximize its advantages, it is recommended to implement this change in conjunction with a comprehensive code cleanup initiative that simplifies the permit review process and establishes transparent decision criteria. And next. Senate Bill 5290 aims to streamline and consolidate local permit review processes. To achieve this, the bill requires jurisdictions to exempt interior alteration permits from site plan review under specific conditions, amends the process for jurisdictions to provide a written determination of completeness for project permit applications, establishes project permit review time periods for permit applications that meet certain public notice and public hearing requirements, amends annual performance reporting requirements for jurisdictions issuing project permits, requires local governments to use the project permit application review time period established by the bill after January 1st of 2025, authorizes local governments to add an additional time period to issue a final decision for each type of project if the applicant is not responsive for more than 60 consecutive days after the local government has notified the applicant. Additionally, the bill requires local governments to refund a proportion of the permit fees if the local government has not issued a final decision by the established time period. Ultimately, the objective of this bill is to improve efficiency and effectiveness in local permit review process. To ensure compliance with this bill, the city must review and amend its administrative procedures under SMC 2109-10 for permit review by March 1st of 2024. And Jeff, I'm going to hand it back to you because we have more.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Last but not least is House Bill 1181, commonly referred to as the Climate Change Bill. And this does require cities to develop a climate change element and resiliency sub-element in its comprehensive plan. So the good news is the Sammamish is ahead of the game on this one. The basis of the bill is actually an edit to or an update to the Growth Management Act. And so there are a number of other pieces that I want to highlight. In the future land use map, requires cities to identify green spaces and forest lands, requires policies around environmental justice, avoiding impacts to environmental health, reducing vehicle miles traveled per capita, reducing wildfire risk, and developing a multimodal level of service. So while this is, again, commonly referred to as the climate change bill, it does have impacts on a number of the elements listed there under the impact section. And again, this is something that Sammamish is well positioned for because of the ongoing work. But there are some implications for the other elements that we'll have to address as part of the comprehensive plan update. But some of these are items that we had already planned on looking at, things like multimodal level of service, identifying green spaces, integration of the forest management plan, so on and so forth. So the deadline to complete this work is the same time as the comprehensive plan at the end of 2024, and there are no decision points at this time. And with that, turn it back over to the mayor for questions.
Councilmember Howe.
Thank you, and thank you for that really speedy and thorough overview. Jeff, my question is for you. You covered 1110, and you were asking the question about should we plan for the larger population of 75,000? And my question has to do with HOAs. I lost a bet to Councilmember Stewart because I was sure that 110 broke through that, but it doesn't, just everything that comes after this point. But how many HOAs do we have in Sammamish that have criteria in them that would prohibit our ability to actually comply? And I know you don't know the answer to that right this second, but that's going to be the question.
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that question, but Kelly has done some great initial research that she, I think, wants to share.
Yeah, we have a lot of HOAs. I'll just say that. I don't have a specific number, but there are quite a few here in the city. And we did pull some HOA CC&Rs. I will say that exercise is very exhausting and long. And it is not something that I think we could get a comprehensive result on to answer the question. But from what we did pull, a lot of the CC&Rs do restrict additional dwelling units, are converting units from a single family residence to a multi-family residence. And looking at the language that I did survey, it looks very boilerplate. So I'm assuming from that small group that we looked at, It's probably safe to assume a lot of the HOAs have that language. This is probably one of the biggest challenges with this bill, because an HOA, that is a contract between the property owner and the development, and the city does not really get involved with that. And so, but what the bill is very clear is any HOAs created after this bill is enacted, which will be July 23 of this year, cannot include those restrictions. So moving forward, it is helpful, but given a city like Sammamish, which has a large amount of HOAs, this could be a challenge and be very limiting to get missing middle in our single family residential areas.
I wonder if there's a way to proactively ask HOAs to submit their CCRs to you, just as a starting point. I'm just kind of positing that. I looked for mine and had trouble finding them. But I do think it delays when we probably have to start planning for that 75,000 population, although my inclination is to plan for that because we will have it at some point. So I think having an eye towards that would be still useful, but I know it'll be longer than many of us might suspect.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, just really quickly to answer your question, I actually don't think we should specifically start planning for the over 75,000. I think we have other challenges we need to meet. So personally, I think we should plan for what produces the best outcomes, right? The most affordable, most sustainable, most reasonable to achieve outcomes and focus on that and not take on the over 75,000. So, I mean, I could see it either way. I just think we've got other problems to solve first. And then in terms of HOAs, we do have our police chief is doing a lot of outreach. We might be able to toss that onto their list of things to ask for while he's reaching out to all the HOAs. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
I believe that King County has projected that our population would only grow to 77,000 in the next 20 years. So I don't know if we need to start planning for 75,000 right now. The other question I had, and I actually asked this on the feedback form for the Housing Diversification Toolkit, was can we have a housing dashboard? I mean, we have all these bills that we have to address, and then there's our own diversification toolkit. How do we measure if we're meeting any of our goals? It'd really be great to see like how things change.
Great question, and that is something we've been talking about quite a bit internally in our staff meetings, and something that we would be pleased to help the city develop. And I think it would be critical to helping us understand the impact of the comprehensive plan and whether we're meeting our obligations in anticipation of that first progress report 5 years after adoption. So.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands, but I know, like it has said a million times over, we're going to learn a lot probably in the next year or so for each of these and kind of how these roll out. But yeah, thank you for reviewing all of these. Super helpful. It's a lot. All housing.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. With that, I think we can move to the next item on the agenda, which is the Economic Development Plan, or element of the comprehensive plan. And Kelly has a presentation that she has set up, and she's also worked really hard to streamline that presentation. So appreciate that. Kelly?
Okay, let's see here. Let me go ahead and, do you see the presentation on your screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so tonight we will be providing an overview of the scope of work for developing the city's first economic development element. This element will establish citywide goals and policies to promote long-term fiscal stability, support small and community-based businesses, foster equitable economic growth, encourage innovation, and support the diversity of the community. As we progress with this work, it's important to note that this update will comply with, there we go. I'm not even keeping up with my script. Okay, as we progress with this work, it's important to note that this update will comply with the Growth Management Act, Vision 2050, and the King County countywide planning policies. The City Council approved by resolution a vision statement for the 2024 comprehensive plan. To recap, the 3 key focus areas within this vision statement that focus on economic development include building a thriving town center and mixed-use districts, supporting local businesses and entrepreneurship, establish fiscal sustainability, and diversify revenues for the city. To ensure the success of our efforts, we are partnering with the Sammamish Chamber of Commerce, an established organization that shares similar objectives. This collaboration will provide valuable guidance and feedback on the research and analysis conducted for the development of the economic development element. It is crucial that the final element reflects the needs and priorities of our business community within the broader context of Sammamish. With that said, let's dive into the various phases of our planning process. In phase 1, we will develop an economic profile and conduct a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. This phase, scheduled from May to June, involves analyzing economic data to create a comprehensive profile of Sammamish's economy. We will pay special attention to the impacts of the pandemic, business activity, retail spending patterns, commuting data, revenues, and opportunities to enhance economic conditions and meet community goals. Moving on to phase 2, which spans from May to October, our primary focus will be on public engagement. We will conduct in-depth focus group interviews with representatives from the business community, community and economic development organizations, and nonprofit entities. Additionally, we will host community and business surveys on Envision Sammamish 2044 website, giving community members and business owners an opportunity to provide their feedback. Furthermore, we will actively seek input at farmers markets and at city events, directly engaging with the community to better understand their preferences and priorities for economic growth in the city. Throughout this phase, the partnership with the Sammamish Chamber of Commerce will be essential, as they will provide valuable feedback based on the work completed during phase 1 and 2. Phase 3 takes place from October all the way to when we have to adopt our comp plan, which is at the end of December 2024. It is dedicated to developing the economic development element itself. Based on the findings from the previous phases, we will draft goals and policies for the Planning Commission and City Council review, recommendation, and approval. To complete this work, we have secured a grant from the Port of Seattle, which, when combined with the city's contribution, provides us with a total project budget of $57,600. The work will be carried out as part of the 2024 comprehensive plan update, with a draft element completed and submitted to the Port of Seattle by February of 2024. Upcoming milestones on our project timeline include a presentation by PSRC to the Planning Commission on June 1st. We encourage you all to tune in, as PSRC will be providing valuable insights and guidance as we move forward with our economic development planning efforts. Also in June, we will conduct surveys and focus groups interviews to gather input from the community and local businesses. We will also be at the farmers market throughout the month. On July 18th, we'll present phase 1 findings to the City Council, followed by the Planning Commission on July 20th. Collaborating with the Chamber of Commerce throughout July and August will shape draft goals and policies, which will be presented to the Planning Commission for review on September 21st and to the City Council on October 21st. Finally, February of 2024, we will submit the draft economic development element to the Port of Seattle. This document will serve as a significant milestone in our comprehensive planning process. As I just mentioned, on July 18th, we will be back in front of the City Council to present the findings from the economic profile, SWOT analysis, and community engagement outreach. This presentation serves as a critical foundation for developing the draft goals and policies of the economic development element. To ensure we are working with the framework set by the vision statement, we'll be asking the City Council the questions listed on this slide. Your feedback will be instrumental in guiding the next phase of work with the Chamber of Commerce and the Planning Commission. So that concludes the presentation, and I'll hand it back to the mayor for any questions.
So streamlined, Kelly. Great job. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, that was not 25 minutes. That was awesome. Thank you. And I assume, I thought you were going to ask us those questions now, but you're going to ask us those on July 18. Is that correct? Okay, well, then I just want to say thank you for that quick overview, and thank you for engaging with our business community. They're so critical and important to us. And I think as we move forward with our fiscal sustainability plan, we are going to find that they need to play an even bigger role in our community. So to answer your first question, I think this whole economic development plan is really critical and couldn't be more critical to us at this point in time. Thanks.
Councilmember Napure?
So Kelly, quick question. Have we had this economic element in the past comprehensive plans?
No, we have not.
Okay. So we have not done any work on this particular, the economic element at all in the past that we can sort of learn from or incorporate that into our current plan?
I think we made a good start of that for the 2015 comprehensive plan, but just did not carry it to the end. So there is some work there. There was a lot of work that was done in 2017, developing some economic development strategies. And that was also funded by the Port of Seattle. Myself and Mike Sugg partnered up on that one to do that work with CAI. And so that is some good baseline information. And actually some of the relevant survey questions we want to re-ask our communities and businesses to see what has changed in some of the trends that have occurred in the last 6 years. So a great place to start and some work we definitely can look at. But yeah, there has also been a lot of changes in the last 6 years, a lot of changes. And we really want to understand that impact on our business community and hear that story.
That's great. I'm glad you have the history of our past work that's been done, because that can provide some baseline. So I know in this presentation and also previously, so we are partnering a lot with the chamber. I just sort of wanted to make sure that does the chamber have that capacity and the data and the outreach to be able to bring forth and really bring into, like rich conversations and data as well. So I'm just not clear. And again, maybe this is something that I think I would like to see. And I know our public would like to see as well, is what sort of depth of experience and information are we getting from the chamber? And then should we just limit ourselves to the chamber in Sammamish, or, expand our outreach to other entities which also might be working with entrepreneurs and business owners in Sammamish as well?
Absolutely. So we're kind of dividing and conquering here. We do have some focus group themes. One is with those business and entrepreneurial organizations like SCORE and so forth, that can really be beneficial in hearing, their story and what that looks like. From the chamber, we've been having some fantastic conversations with them over the last month and a half to help identify folks in the business community here in Sammamish that kind of represent the fabric of Sammamish. So smaller business, bigger businesses that have left. And we want to hear from them and start to create this group that can help start to frame what those goals and policies are, so those can be further vetted by our planning commission and yourselves. And so we are working on that right now, but I think that is fantastic feedback for us to consider as we're kind of rounding out the roster from the chamber to help us with this review this summer and getting those draft goals and policies put together. Jeff, did you want to add anything to that? Did I miss something?
No, you did a great job. I would just add that the data side of it is ongoing. We're meeting tomorrow internally. We put in some data requests to the city. There's some state level data that takes a little bit of time to request. as well as the traditional, data sources that are easier to access online. So that is in process, and we look forward to bringing that back. And as Kelly said, there's some prior work that we can build.
I was going to jump in at the tail end of that and say, one of the reasons why this is important work is that we've had to forego opportunities recently to participate in regional forums around events. We've had grant opportunities that we could have applied for that we wouldn't really have a competing chance in because we haven't had economic development policy. There are several things that we have had to sit on the sidelines for because we have not had this type of direction in our comprehensive plan. So this is really a great opportunity for us to figure out what the right size of economic development is for the city and set that direction. And one of the things that we're going to need from you is, and from the community, is to help identify what the right size of economic development is. There's a lot of different options to consider. There's the full range of do nothing and stay where we are now, to building out, large box retail. And I don't think anybody's really thinking about that in terms of where we're going. However, we want to know, between the bookends, where does the community want us to be? Another thing that we face is we have a gap between home businesses that have gotten too big for their homes and need to find affordable commercial space, retail space, where they could set up shop, and we don't have a lot of that available. So also thinking about how to provide that. And another thing is COVID. Something like COVID hits, well, do we have policy and strategy in our comprehensive plan to help identify when we get grants or federal dollars to help support businesses, how we distribute it? I know that was a challenge for the city, is how do we distribute funds that we need to get out to the community to help these businesses survive? So there are many reasons to take on this work, and we're really fortunate that the port is helping us start this process and that we have framework and others to help with this. So thank you.
Councilmember Howe.
Well, Councilmember Ratuja Indapura was channeling me. I think you just nailed everything I would have asked. The one addition I'll kind of put onto this is a great opportunity to promote what you're doing. So this is really for the city manager to work with the communications team, because as you do outreach to the business community, they're going to be hungry for that. They want to know that they're an important asset to the city. And so if there's any way that we could highlight, promote, extend, just make it a bigger deal and amplify it, and to talk to those that have left the chamber, like you identified that, and that's really important, because there are people on board and there are people that left. They left the ship. So what would bring them back, or did they need to come back, and what do they know that we don't know that we absolutely have to know? So this is a great work. I'm so glad you're working on it.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
So my question is, how does this economic development element mesh with the financial sustainability plan? And I guess I'm looking at it in terms of the town center. I mean, I see them like being kind of interlocked almost. You may look at the town center as being needed for financial sustainability, and then that town center is kind of rooted in economic development. So I don't know, is there plans to come together, or I don't know, maybe you can help me understand that a little bit better.
So I'm happy to jump in, and Kelly can fill in the gaps where I miss things, because she's also very, very knowledgeable on this. But this is a great opportunity to address the bridge between the city's financial sustainability going forward and what we do in terms of planning for additional services and retail in the city. The one thing that I know is noted is that when rules changed around point of delivery for retail sales tax, the city increased its revenue. And if there were additional businesses located in the city where they're higher value businesses in terms of their revenue potency, that would also increase revenue. There are consultant firms that do this full time, where they analyze how to optimize your zoning to get return on that investment of placing businesses in your community. That's not to say that adding retail is going to fix any of our, all of our financial sustainability issues, but it is one piece of the puzzle. Other cities that have become more dependent on retail revenue have also seen problems develop when the economy goes sideways. So, you have to have a diverse revenue stream in order to ensure your sustainability in the long term, because the environment changes over time.
Mm-hmm.
So that, we're looking forward to studying the cross relationship more with the city's sustainability work that we're doing for financial sustainability and the economic development plan as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands up. Did you have anything else to add, Kelly or Jeff?
I don't. Thank you all very much. We are very excited to start this work. It's been a long time coming. And we will see you back on July 18th with more information to digest.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. This is exciting. Have a good evening. Thank you, David.
Thank you, and thank you to Kelly and Jeff for those presentations, and to Brightworks and Miriam for the prior presentations. I appreciate all the help.
Yes, Kelly would do all PowerPoints from now on.
Oh boy.
All right, Scott, do you have a city manager report?
I have a quick one. I'll keep this brief. A couple of quick notes. I know council last meeting discussed the need to address the Blake decision. Want to just announce out that it was the legislature took action today and solved that problem for us. If council hasn't had a chance to take a look, lots of information out there on that. So we're going to take that one off the long-term calendar, and we will not be coming back and addressing that from a policy perspective. I do want to, since we were talking about the chamber, I want to note that the farmers market is tomorrow. It will be the second farmers market. I thought last week was a really good turnout. It was great weather. It was great to see everyone out. We had a nice ribbon cutting, and I'm really excited to have the chamber up and running and having the farmers market up and running. Along those lines, since we just did declare Pride Month for June, I want to welcome everyone to join us on May 31st for our Pride event and raising of the Pride Progress flag. It will be as part of the farmers market. The event itself will happen around 5:30, but we'll have booths and other things out in conjunction with the farmers market. So I do want to thank the chamber for partnering with us on that and giving us the space. We'll be a little bit off front and center, but we'll be right there with them for that event. I do want to note really quickly that Thursday night, we will have our final DEIB training for boards and commissions. We had the first one on Saturday the 6th. I understand it went fairly well. Looking forward to this one on Thursday, and then we will, the council, boards, and commissions all will have taken the training. So really looking forward to that, and leadership team takes that on tomorrow. So I want to thank council for supporting that. And getting us through all of that. I think it's really important, getting us all on the same playing field. And with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Stewart?
I just want to invite everybody to Rigapalooza. I was going to leave that for you, Scott, and you didn't call it out, man.
I'm clearly tired.
I understand.
It's written on my paper.
I know. Saturday, Rigapalooza at 11 to 2, I think it is. Is that right? Yes. So come get on big trucks and things. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
So last Wednesday, I had a public issues committee meeting, and the main topic was the Blake decision, and Scott just answered that. So there we have it.
Awesome. Anyone else? Councilmember Treen?
I move to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.